Hey everybody, welcome to the Hang Up here on the line. I'm Matt Dillahunty, and what am I hung up on this week? Why, it's young Republicans. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. Politico just released a news item about the leaders of the young Republicans who were in a Telegram chat, and there's been a leak, and I don't know how many thousands of messages came out of this, but turns out these fine, upstanding young Republicans are racist and bigoted and fans of Hitler. I mean, just reading through some of the selected messages, it's everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber. We're officially under consideration for Trump endorsement. Great. I love Hitler. You're giving nationals too much credit and expecting the Jews to be honest. That particular message will come back to you in a minute. Are you going to do whatever it takes? If we ever have a leak of this chat, we would be cooked for real, for real. Kick the bitch. Boom, they're dead. Stay in the closet. They love the watermelon people. I'd go to the zoo if I wanted to play monkey ball. All of these things, including jokes about rape, F-slur, R-slur. I'm surprised the news article didn't include it. I guarantee you, like, I would bet a sizable chunk of my monthly income that the T-slur is used frequently in there as well. That just didn't necessarily make the article. And so they're using, they're hating on the Jews. They're using racial epithets to refer to black people, to Indian people, to just everybody who's not white. Surprise! It's I don't know. This is the least surprising thing, other than they knew they would get in trouble if they leaked, if it ever leaked, and yet they kept on fucking doing this. So it's like, it's wrong, or at least people think it's wrong, but you don't think it's wrong, so you're going to keep doing it, and then you're going to cowardly keep doing it in private. What I can tell you is that you will not find private messages from me, and hopefully from nobody I know, who line up with this stuff at all. Now, the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, retweeted a message about all of this and was suggesting that some comments from someone else were worse. And what he said is, this message, whatever it was he retweeted, is far worse than anything said in a college group chat, and the guy who said it could become the Attorney General of Virginia. I refuse to join the pearl clutching when powerful people call for political violence. And he was responding to something by saying, there are things that are worse than what this group of young Republicans said, these college kids. Except that that's whataboutism. It's fallacious, and saying that's worse. Maybe it is worse. Maybe it's not as bad. None of it has anything to do with whether or not the language is acceptable. And the vice president went on to say, if you focus on what kids say in group chats instead of calls for political violence, he's definitely not with you. Well, Mr. Vice President, these aren't kids, and you know it. The Young Republicans group is for Republicans 18 to 40. And while you're now 41 and have aged out of that group, last year when you were running for office, you were still eligible and might well have been a member of the Young Republicans. And I get that, you still think like a high schooler, and where the seniors can mock the juniors and stuff. But as you get older, turning 41 doesn't mean you start referring to 39-year-olds and 38-year-olds as kids. It's incredibly dishonest to take this collection of individuals ranging from 18 to 40, some of whom are elected officials, and frame it as if these are just kids saying stuff. And then he goes on to say, we're not going to allow the worst moment in a 21-year-old's group chat to ruin their life. We're not canceling kids because they do something in a group chat. This is the dishonest fucking liar that is the Vice President of the United States of America. He's framing this as if, it's just kids, just shrug it off. They're just saying whatever. The fact is, these are young Republicans. And one of the individuals in question is Orleans County, Vermont State Senator Samuel Douglas. The Republican governor of Vermont, Phil Scott, is calling on Samuel Douglas to resign. Senator Douglas is a first-time state senator. He's 27 years old, and he was elected last November. And last week, he was one of 6 Republican lawmakers nominated for Legislator of the Year by the Vermont GOP. Doesn't sound like a kid to me. This sounds like this individual, 27 years old, brand new state senator, up for nomination as one of the legislators of the year in Vermont, was evidently in this chat. And it turns out that Senator Douglas and his wife were both in this chat, and they used racist and anti-Semitic language where he mocked the bathing habits of people from India, and his wife is the one who made the top of the list there in the Politico thing by saying, you're giving nationals too much credit and expecting the Jews to be honest. Now, Governor Phil Scott is a Republican, although a Vermont one. And he said, quote, the hateful statements made in this group chat are disgusting and unacceptable. The vile, racist, bigoted, and anti-Semitic dialogue that's been reported is deeply disturbing. There's simply no excuse for it. Those involved should resign from their roles immediately and leave the Republican Party, including State Senator Sam Douglas. Now, to his credit, that is a clear statement that this is generally unacceptable. And specifically, this individual and anybody else who participated in this should resign for the good of the party. So there is the Republican governor of Vermont calling on State Senator Sam Douglas to resign. And he's not alone. I happen to agree with them. But the story gets even cooler for me. And that is that it turns out that this Sam Douglas individual is not just a state senator from Vermont, but as a member of Arden's extended family, a cousin by marriage. No shit. There are other potential stories and things that we're just not going to get into, because I'm not here to slander him for shit that he did when he was actually a kid, where he was problematic in schools or whatever else. I'm here to see that justice is served. And so if you're in Vermont, or you have relatives in Vermont, you should encourage them to reach out and do as the governor of Vermont has suggested and call for the resignation of racist, bigoted Sam Douglas, the Orleans County, Vermont state senator, who just happens to be related to the person I love. It's nice when bad things happen to bad people. And with apologies to David Bowie, they're all white. These are the young Republicans, young Republicans, young Republicans. These are the dumb Americans, all white. I was debating on whether I should go with young Americans or I'm afraid of Americans, except that stuff like this doesn't make me afraid of them anymore. It makes me happy that they're dumb enough to keep getting caught and keep bravely hiding their racism in chats when other Republicans are out there doing it in public. And the thing that I want to drill into everybody's head is none of us know how much longer before none of these types of messages are ever even the slightest bit hidden at all. If all of them can go full mask off, talking about who they hate and which race is dirty and which ones are dishonest, as these white and white supremacist and white pride, racist, bigoted young Republicans continue to dominate on behalf of other racist, white, young Republicans like Charlie Kirk. Happy birthday. It was yesterday, but you know, this is bizarre to me. Every day I talk about it. Every week I talk about it. I keep waking up and going, wow, I can't believe this is the world we live in. And it is. So yeah. Damn, Sam. I never met you. Hope I never do. Hope you have to resign and that you have to do so quickly, because I think that the vice president is wrong that this isn't just kids being kids and maybe we shouldn't hold them accountable for what they say. No, this is racist ideology. And the governor of Vermont is correct to say there is simply no excuse for it. And anyone involved should be embarrassed and resign immediately. They're doing harm to the Republican Party. You know who they're not doing harm to? MAGA. MAGA is the cancer. There are Republicans that I can at least agree with on some things. I have yet to meet MAGA folks who can defend anything, who can think their way out of a wet paper sack, who can in any way demonstrate that their vision leads to a better world for all. They just have the delusion that they're safe from their own hatred and the weapons that they're swinging around at others, and that they will come out on top until they're next in line to be eaten by the face-eating animals. But also this week, there was what seems to be sort of a fake peace deal in Gaza. And, Mike Johnson got up and decided he's going to try and nominate Trump for the Nobel Prize next year because Trump didn't get it this year. But another kind of probably awful person did, who then dedicated part of it to Trump. And so now the Nobel Peace Prize is just I guess just something you lobby for rather than having a group of people look around at the world and see who's actually making it a better place. It's more of a, I think perhaps Oscars and Tonys are more valuable and justified in this case than, the Nobel Prizes. Although some of the ones in other fields might actually be good. I guess it depends on who's doing it. I knew that Norway was concerned that if Trump didn't get it, they might face consequences. So I guess they gave it to somebody who would suck up to him as he continues to supposedly take out, Venezuelan boats. We don't know. We don't get any information. There's no due process. There's no demonstration that anything that they say is true. But Trump's being applauded and lauded by people around the world for helping secure some sort of peace deal, which didn't last any time at all. There were some hostages exchanged, and Israel now claims that Hamas is slow rolling the hostages because Hamas said that they needed time to dig through the rubble to find the bodies of hostages that were destroyed by Israel's bombs. And Israel's claiming this violates the deal, despite reports that Israel had been violating the deal with heavy bombing the whole time. Israel broke this on Tuesday. They killed 5 Palestinians in Shujaiya, a neighborhood in Gaza. They bombed north of Gaza City, and they did a drone strike in Khan Yunis. Israel's defense minister, Katz, said that he had instructed the IDF to prepare for carrying out the mission of demilitarizing Gaza and neutralizing Hamas. So despite their cooperation in releasing hostages, they weren't getting it done fast enough because they have to dig through the rubble of a war zone. And that's then used as an excuse for Israel to deny humanitarian aid again. By the way, release the Epstein files, but by all means, join me and my guest tonight, Justin from Deconstruction Zone, in trying to prove that your God isn't imaginary. Hey, Justin, how you doing?
Couldn't be better, Matt. Thanks for having me on tonight. I'm excited to see what kind of calls we get. Maybe we'll be Christians by the end of it. I don't know.
Could be. I've been one before. I just didn't have a good reason. This time, I'm only going to do it if I got a really good reason. I watched, while I was doing other stuff today, you were live, I guess, practicing up to clean some clocks tonight, if need be. But when you're live, you post a thing up there that's like, your God's imaginary, prove me wrong. How frequently do you get pushback that even the mere statement that you're using to kind of start the conversation is a shifting of the burden of proof?
I get it a lot, almost every time I go live. And the funny thing is, there's kind of 2 things on the background. The second clause is prove me wrong. So I've already pushed the burden out there. They know that if they come up, their burden is to prove that their God isn't imaginary. But even if that's not true, I put very specifically, your God is imaginary. The reality is 99% of people don't believe in a deistic God. And if you don't believe in a deistic God, I can prove your God wrong. I could back up that claim. I've got all kinds of reasons why your God doesn't exist and why it entails contradictions, so on and so forth. So the reality is, almost always, if someone really wants to push that burden back on me, I can say, good, tell me what your God is, what type of a God it is, and I'll tell you why that God doesn't exist. I do openly admit, though, like if you believe in a deistic God, there's some arguments against it, but it's a much harder case. But the reality is, like, if you believe in a deistic God, it's not much different than believing in just some sort of a non-sentient force of nature. At that point, what are you even doing?
Yeah, and my take on it, I mean, don't get me wrong, I like the fact that it prompts a conversation. And so if you're out there tonight and you're convinced that your God isn't imaginary and should not be included in the potential list of imaginary beings that Justin and I would think are imaginary, please go ahead, 720-619-2288, or there's a link down in the description how you can call in over your internet connected advice, because we'd love for you to show that we're wrong about whether your God's imaginary. My take is there's soft/weak atheism, which is the I'm not convinced that a God exists. And then there's the hard or strong atheism, which is I'm convinced there are no gods. And depending on how people are going to define gods and how colloquial we want to get, I might put myself in either category. For example, of all the testable gods, I think they are all imaginary. And untestable gods, I don't know how we could determine if they were imaginary or not, which means anybody who is convinced that those things are real has already, it's not that we can show that their God is imaginary, it's we can show that they are irrational for thinking it's not imaginary. They haven't demonstrated that. And so it's not like Justin and I came out of nowhere and just said, hey, your God's imaginary, prove me wrong. No, it's after thousands and thousands of years of people making God claim after God claim. And most of them, not all, but most of them would look at the millions of God claims and say, all of those are wrong except for mine. A few of them would say, all of those are wrong except for this handful. And some of them would say, they're all right. And those people are amongst the most confused, because then they're saying, oh, no, this God and this God, who have completely contradictory views, are the same God, that's just humans got it wrong. And so as we go through that, and tonight, Justin's here. And if you think your God isn't imaginary, by all means, pick up the phone, call in. There's a few announcements to get out of the way real quick before we start going to calls. And I see already calls are queuing up. I don't know. There we go. I've got the schedule for the coming week here on the line. Now, the line is a network dedicated to call-in shows. We do them all the time, but we're doing them even more. So I guess we don't currently do them all the time. We do them with incredible frequency, and it's getting to be pushed more and more. So tonight is a hang up. Justin's here with me. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central, it's the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Arden and Lux. Then there may be is that a golden mic on Friday or Thursday? Friday, yeah. On Saturday is the Secular Student Alliance fundraiser right here on the line. It's going to be from 1 o'clock till 10 Central. All the times that I've given you are Central. We're going to have a lot of guest speakers. We are going to be raising money over that period of time for the Secular Student Alliance, an organization that I think is needed now more than ever, because the young Republicans are evidently just awful, but that only includes the 18 to 40-year-olds. That doesn't tell you what they're getting away with in as far as indoctrination and misinformation on the under 18 edge as well. And so the Secular Student Alliance, which primarily operates in universities, but did in the past, and I think may still have chapters in high schools as well. But it's an opportunity to have those individuals who are secular, who can't get together with the Campus Crusade for Christ, which stupidly changed its name to CRU, C-R-U, a number of years ago, which I think was just hilarious. But that's not a place for them. And so having organizations with like-minded individuals where they can get together and work towards common goals and maybe interact with and challenge, maybe they can have a softball game against CRU. I'm pretty sure they'll get their clock cleaned. I'm pretty sure that if you took the average Campus Crusade for Christ group and put them up against the average secular group, you're just picking from a larger pool. It's why the United States tends to win some medals. It's not because we're better at everything than everybody. We got a better pool. to pick from because it's just bigger than some of these smaller countries, smaller nations. Anyway, so that's what's going on up through Saturday. And then on Sunday, I'll be back on for the Sunday show at 2 p.m. Central with Seth Andrews. And next Monday's Skeptalk will be Arden and Owen. That's at 6 p.m. Central. And next Tuesday's Chewed Gum will be Taylor and Alyssa at 6 p.m. If you don't know what all those shows are about, I don't know how you found us right now when the show's first starting, but look it up. They're all here on the line. You can like, subscribe. And all of the super chats tonight, which we will be reading once we're done with the callers. And are we using the same limit, Arden? Is it still at...
So actually, all the supers are going to go to the fundraiser, and we can't collect super chats. They just go as donations to the fundraiser tonight. I forgot to mention that before we started.
Oh, so we're not going to read them.
Correct. We can't read them.
Okay.
Yep.
In that case, thanks in advance on behalf of the Secular Student Alliance. Everybody who donates tonight, boom, I see it already. Boom, anonymous donated, anonymous donated, anonymous donated. There's a lot. I see a lot of euros. Where's all the dollars? All you non-racist Americans can start. There we go. We're starting to see some super chats there. You guys need to donate. Non-racist, you Antifa, trans-friendly, queer-friendly, blue-haired in the good way. Get those dollar bills in for the Secular Student Alliance because there's a lot of work going on. We're going to have several interviews talking specifically about what they're doing, what they need to do, how they're reorganizing that organization to build towards the future, and how things may have changed in this fascist regime. There's a bigger need for stuff. And honestly, I mean, Justin and I are here tonight, and I know we would both love, especially, like, I'd rather not get political calls at all, despite the fact that this is the more political leaning show of the ones that I do. But, I'll take them. But genuinely, if you think we've missed something, I have made a guarantee to nobody but me and some people in chat who swore I couldn't. I'm unflappable this evening. I'm not a bird. You can't rile me up. I got Justin here. I can take a breath, but I do have some changes to make on a few things. One is that there is a delay involved. And there's a delay not only between myself and Justin and us and the producers, but also there's a delay between the callers and us. And that's incredibly frustrating. And we tend to resolve it or try to resolve it by using the mute button. I can't promise this, but I would like to not have to use the mute button tonight at all. I suspect we probably will. But my current goal is to only use it when it's clear that the other individual can't hear us trying to get clarification on something. Because quite frankly, they will often say something and immediately a red flag will go up in my head. I'm like, oh, you need to define that. And then they get mad because they're interrupted. And you guys have no idea where they were going, or some of you know exactly where they're going and some of you don't. And I'm not sure that everybody's benefiting by cutting it off too quickly. So as long as they're seemingly honest interlocutors, I'm going to let them run on a little bit and just put more onus on me to do a better job of taking notes on what they say. But please, if you're a caller, try to pay attention to what we ask specifically. Bring a notepad. Do it on your computer, whatever you do. Jot down the specific question we ask, because I'm going to be, like, every time Justin or I ask a question, I'm going to jot that question down. Because inevitably, you're going to answer some other question, or you're going to go down your script, or you're going to do whatever, and you'll think that you answered the question when you really didn't. And we're asking very specific questions because we found our way out of the mire that some people are put in. And we're genuinely, like, if we're wrong, like, Justin, if somebody shows up tonight and gives us a solid evidence-based argument for the existence of God, you and I are going to have to change our formats starting tomorrow morning. Maybe tonight.
My
I don't
new
think I'd
tagline is going to be God is real, prove me wrong.
I mean, I don't think I could even wait till tomorrow. This has been a good chunk of my life. I was a Southern Baptist fundamentalist Christian nationalist, going to be a preacher. I was a Rush Limbaugh ditto head. I was active in the church all the time. To have done this for now 20 some odd years and then turn around and go back, I don't think I would sleep tonight at all. I think I would be recording videos to talk about the amazing day that I've had and how I need to think on it and how it's going to fundamentally change stuff. And you have to ask yourself, why hasn't that happened? What is God waiting for? Because I get emails from people from time to time saying, oh, God told me he's getting ready to do a powerful work in your life. I've been hearing that for 20 years.
Every day I get that email.
My own mom once said that she had been told that God was going to give myself and my ex-wife a miracle baby that would bring us back to Jesus. Now, I can't get anybody pregnant. My ex-wife would also potentially have difficulty conceiving. And so when my mom said this, I was like, wow, that would genuinely, I mean, it would still be scientifically possible, because we were having sex and I still had some viable sperm, but it's really unlikely. And it would probably qualify as something close to miraculous. And yet what my mom doesn't understand or didn't understand is that even that wouldn't be enough. I would need some sort of demonstration that this event, which is incredibly unlikely, was actually caused by God. And then I'd have to say, why would God not give me any sort of sign, not respond to anything that I asked? All that time I spent on my knees on my way out, begging God for a reason to stay. Can you do this? Can you demonstrate this? Oh my gosh, please, please, please help me, and getting nothing. And then all of a sudden, years later, after building, up a reputation as an atheist debater, God decides to give me a miracle baby, which doesn't confirm anything to someone who understands skepticism. And yet that's supposed to bring me back. I think you would need a serious, brain trauma on my part for me to throw out the foundational principles of skepticism and conclude, ooh, somebody got pregnant when it was unlikely, therefore God. Again, even a virgin birth. I mean, to be fair, there are plenty of reptiles that give virgin birth that reproduce parthenogenically. While we have no confirmed incidences of that happening in humans, that doesn't mean it's impossible. But I could certainly understand if there was a proper, parthenogenic pregnancy in humans, why that would lead some people to believe that I would get. You know what I don't get? I don't get the ones where it's like, I was so beaten down and having a rough life, and then I prayed and my life got a little bit better. And that was enough. And all the bad things that have happened since then is the devil coming after me for being right with Christ. I'm like, what a good life that is. Tell me about that good life.
Yeah, there's no benefit really to believing in this deity except that you get to rejoice while he's kicking your ass.
Yep. So we've got a bunch of calls and I want to get right to it. So what we're going to do is Micah is calling from Washington. Thank you so much for calling in and holding on very patiently, Micah. I don't know if you could hear me in the pre-show, but I was eager to take your call, but I knew it was going to be, at least a half hour before we got to it. So Micah, pronounced him, from Washington, wants to explain why the Bible is reliable. Michael, you are on. Welcome to the show with Justin and Matt.
Thank you. It's an honor to talk to you guys.
Are you there, Micah? Please be there.
I'm here. There's a long delay.
He's there, but he can't hear you for some reason.
Micah?
Give me a sec.
I can hear you.
You can hear him, Justin?
I can hear him. This is
No, I don't hear Micah.
Okay.
I'm here.
1 second. I think I know what's up. Here, Micah, I'm so sorry. We're going to put you back in the queue for a second so I can sort this. If you guys can vamp for me.
In the meantime,
The
this
Lord
is a
saw
great
the
opportunity.
conversation and cut it off. Sorry.
Yeah. This is a great opportunity for you people out there to click the like button. I understand that times are difficult and they're going to get more difficult with tariffs, and there may be wars coming. There may be recessions and depressions and further economic struggles. And you may not be able to donate to keep the line working, and you may not be able to donate to help the Secular Student Alliance, but you can click the like button. You can click join. That costs you nothing and actually does a great deal. It lets YouTube know, hey, this is content that you think people should be paying attention to. It draws much more coming in. So right now, I looked at the number. I've got that number in my head. If you guys don't get the like counter doubled in like 3 minutes, I'm just going to stop the show. I'm just going to.
Can we do a quick test?
I can't do that. But
can you talk to our host, please?
Hello. Can you hear me this time?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much, Mike. I appreciate your patience. Welcome to the show. You wanted to explain to us why the Bible is reliable. So welcome.
I've never read it. You'll have to give me an education, Micah. What about the Bible is reliable?
Yeah, I think that the fact that the New Testament is as historically reliable as any other work of history lets us read it and find out what Jesus taught and his claim to be God, and that he could prove it by dying and rising again.
Sure. You want to start on page 1?
I'd prefer to start in the New Testament. We can go to the Old if you want, but I'm convinced
page 1 of the New Testament.
More by the evidence for the New Testament.
Yeah, page 1 of the New Testament, Matthew chapter 1.
Sure.
There's multiple problems with Matthew 1. Scan down for me to the middle of the lineage, about verse 8. It says Asaph, the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat, the father of Joram, Joram, the father of Uzziah, verse 8.
Yep.
Are you under the impression that that's the correct lineage? Because if you go back to the lineage within Chronicles, that's not the correct lineage. As it turns out, Joram had a son named Azahiah, and there was Joash and Amaziah and Azariah. Azariah is also the name for Uzziah. He just left out 3 names.
Yeah.
Was he drunk that day?
Matthew, yeah. So Matthew 1:1 shows that you can skip generations. It describes Jesus as the son of David, the son of Abraham. So that skips a lot of generations without being inaccurate.
No, that's not
a descendant.
So I'm wondering, just out of curiosity, I'm right now. I've got English Standard Version up. Is that the one you're quoting from, Justin?
I'm in the NRSV, but I'm sure the ESV is fine.
ESV, NRSV, pretty fine. Do you have a preferred version that you like to reference, Micah?
I'm reading from the NIV 1984. If it was good enough for Paul and Silas, it's good enough for me. That's a joke.
Well,
that's a joke, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because it reminds me of the old joke about, if English was good enough for Jesus, it should be good enough for everybody. But so yes, so you're reading from the NIV. I have a number of problems with the NIV, but I appreciate the fact that it's softer than, for example, the King James Version. But I want to let Justin continue with what he's talking about here, because the first verse isn't saying Jesus is the son of David, son of Abraham in a genealogical sense, but it's just referring to is a descendant from David. And then the rest of these verses chronicle those, because if they chronicle it from Abraham up to Jesus, and Justin's pointing out that it skips some.
Right.
Yeah, I believe
the terminology
if you check the
here,
genealogies comparing against each other in the Old Testament also, they skip generations too, that was within the way Jews did genealogies.
They didn't. All right. So in verse 1, it says this is the account of the genealogy of Jesus. Right. So the goal of Matthew is to give an account of that genealogy. And then when you read the genealogy, it doesn't say son of, it says so-and-so begat, so-and-so begat. What that means is they're saying this person came from the loins of this person. It's a begatting. But Joram did not begat Uzziah. Why in the world would you try to give a genealogy of somebody and then randomly just leave off 3 people. By the way, this is not Matthew's only mistake in chapter 1. There's more.
Oh, I
can't
think
count
Matthew
either.
is doing that. You asked a good question. Why would Matthew leave people out? Verse 17
You think he's doing it on
shows
purpose?
that he's trying to give, 14s in 3 sections.
But you walked into it.
Mark.
Yeah, you just cooked yourself.
Yeah.
Count the generations in the last third. How many are there? I guarantee it's not 14. He couldn't even
You're
count to
right.
14.
One is double counted.
Yeah,
Yep. You're right.
you're right. He double counted. So not only can he not count, not only can he not read the lineage, he also screws up the lineage because he traced it all the way through Jeconiah. Jeconiah was cursed. In Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 30, it says that none of Jeconiah's descendants will sit on the throne of David again. He's done. He's cooked. Page number 1, Jesus' failure.
But maybe the genealogy, maybe it's a rough sketch, maybe it's a scribal error. Maybe that's not enough to conclude that Jesus isn't in fact divine. But would you at least agree that right at the beginning of the New Testament, we already have a problem that makes the content of the New Testament, or at least the book of Matthew, dubious at best?
What I would say, no, I don't think it makes it dubious. I think that 14s is a memory trick that you can use to follow all of history, and that he's trying to give a broad sweep of history, not use precision the way that we would.
Except that the specific language there suggests precision, because it specifically talks about this being all of the generations from A to B, and that there are 14, and he gets the count wrong and skip stuff. How is that? Why if you wanted to give like a general view of this, why not just have verse 1 and say the book, and not say anything about the genealogy, but just say Jesus Christ being the son of David, the son of Abraham, or a descendant of Abraham, without posting an erroneous list? I mean, did God know that the author of Matthew was going to get that wrong?
Get it imprecise? Yes, I do think that God knew that.
Why did God allow it to be imprecise?
Is I don't know an acceptable answer?
It's a great answer. The problem is, if you don't know why God would allow it, that would seem to me to also be a problem, because my view, when I was a biblical literalist, was that God inspired scripture and there will be scribal errors, but anything that would be potentially a stumbling block to people grasping and understand the true story should not exist. And certainly, do you think the original copy of Matthew, this error doesn't exist?
No, I think that Matthew is giving us a broad sketch, and that we have preserved what Matthew originally wrote.
Okay.
So he's just a dunce.
So when he continues after the genealogy to talk about Mary turning up pregnant, what is the evidence that Mary hadn't had sex and was in fact impregnated by the Holy Spirit?
There isn't evidence given in the text. We're only told the story. And Joseph didn't believe it in advance either.
Yeah. Do we have anything beyond the Bible for any of these stories?
No.
Okay. So my understanding, and I'm gonna back off and take a breath, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page, and I really appreciate this, Micah. Sorry. Michael is both my dad and my nephew's name, so I'm going to slip once or twice. My apologies. So you're saying that you find the New Testament largely reliable, despite errors from the first page and despite external confirming evidence for its claims?
I would use different words for each of those two things, but yes.
Okay. Do you understand why I don't?
Yes. Yeah,
Cool.
I do.
Justin?
All right. I mean, we're still in Matthew 1. You want to go to the next problem in Matthew?
Sure. The
Sure.
other thing
So,
is that Jesus' death and resurrection is more compelling to me than his birth and etc. part of the story.
Okay.
You can keep going
I'm
chronologically
sure we'll
if
get
you
there.
want, or if you want to skip there.
I'm pretty sure we'll get there,
I don't
but
have
I
a
want to
cur-
make sure Justin hits this.
yeah, I don't have a curfew.
Yeah, go
We can
ahead.
get to that next. We'll go there right after Matthew chapter 1, although chapter 2 is a doozy. That being said, at the end of Matthew chapter 1, he quotes from the Old Testament again, doesn't he? He quotes from Isaiah when he says, "Look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to a son. They shall name him Emmanuel." And that supposedly is the prophecy that's being fulfilled. But when I read Isaiah, there's nothing in there about a virgin birth. Why is that?
Because the Old Testament was translated from Hebrew to Greek, and Matthew is
You got it.
quoting from the Greek translation.
That's right. And why doesn't the Hebrew and the Greek match?
Because the Greek word is more precise, the Hebrew word can mean any young maiden, and the Greek word can only mean a virgin. It shows that the Jews who translated it believed that's what their word meant in the original.
Nope, that's not what that means. Actually, what happened is at the time Isaiah was translated from Hebrew to Greek, Parthenos could be used of a non-virgin. We see that in Genesis 34, speaking of Dinah, after she's already been raped by Shechem in the Greek Septuagint, it lists her after that fact as a Parthenos. We see it in the writings of Homer. Parthenos is used multiple times to refer to women who already have children. The reality is the semantic range of Parthenos narrowed closer to the time of Matthew. So when Matthew was reading the Greek Septuagint, because that fool could not read Hebrew, and I repeat, Matthew could not read Hebrew, he was reliant on the Greek text, he understood Parthenos to only have the semantic range that he understood it to have in the late first century. The reality is that's not what it would have meant at the time Isaiah was actually translated into Greek. And the context of the passage demonstrates that it's not actually about a Messiah at all. It's about a child born during the reign of King Ahaz. And before that child is old enough to know right from wrong, the two kings that are attacking King Ahaz, their two kingdoms are going to be laid waste. So it's a prophecy for about 13 years during the reign of King Ahaz. It's about King Ahaz's war against Pekah and Rezin.
Yeah, in Isaiah 7, that is the original context of the verse that Matthew is applying to Jesus. You're right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so if the original context of the prophecy is about the two kingdoms attacking the Judeans, and the prophecy comes true in chapter 8, which it does, if you read chapter 8, the king of Assyria comes down like a flood of water and destroys the two northern kingdoms, just as the prophecy foretold, then the prophecy was completed 725 years before Jesus. I have no reason to think that Jesus is remotely related to this, virgin or not.
Isaiah 9 is the reason that I think it's not fully fulfilled by the child back in Isaiah 7 and 8, where it talks about a child.
Oh no, you
being
don't want to
born
do Isaiah
us.
9. Okay, well, we can do Isaiah 9. Yeah, is a child has been born to us, a child has been given to us, is that future tense or past tense? And keep in mind, the correct answer is past tense, and there's no such thing as a prophetic perfect.
Yeah, it's past tense.
Okay, so the child was already born. This is obviously a prophecy for the new King Hezekiah, right? So in the ancient Near East, when there was a new succession that was born, and it was clear that the child was going to actually survive, and it was established that they would be the next in line, you have all these really interesting prophecies that were penned. We find them in Egypt. We find them all throughout the ancient Near East. And the reality is, one thing that you do is you give this next king a bunch of theophoric names, all kinds of names. In fact, this is one of the reasons why most scholars believed for a long time that Egyptians thought that the pharaoh was a god, because of the theophoric throne names that were given to him. But the reality is, the theophoric names aren't necessarily describing the king itself. They're describing typically the relationship between the god and the king, because God chooses the king. So the child was born in the middle of the Assyrian conquest. Isaiah chapter 9 is about that lull in the Assyrian conquest between the first siege And the last siege was a period of about 15 years where they had peace and quiet before the Assyrians came in again and destroyed what was left of the northern 10 tribes. This was a prophecy around the same time Hezekiah would have been born, about Hezekiah. And obviously it's preserved because Hezekiah was known as a great king who led reforms within Israel and even held off the Assyrians.
Yeah, and
tense,
sitting
man.
on David's throne, and David and his line are called sons of God in the Old Testament. So that I can see that connection there.
Yeah, and Jesus never sat on that throne once. He didn't rule for a single minute within Israel.
That's true, but like David was anointed as the Christ and was called that between the time he was anointed and began to reign, that's how I think the title Christ is used of Jesus, as the rightful one who should be reigning.
Right, but Jesus was never even anointed. Christ just means anointed in Greek. It's similar to Mashiach in Hebrew, and he wasn't even anointed. The only anointing he ever received was prior to his crucifixion by the woman with the jar of nard, and he says, "This is in lieu of my anointing for the burial." So the reality is, he was never even anointed in the first place. Like, you have to go to this spiritualized idea of anointing, like, well, he was anointed by God, like that even means anything.
His baptism is described as an anointing in Luke 4, quoting from Isaiah 61. Whether you accept that or not, that's what the New Testament is talking about as his anointing is his baptism.
I'm sure. I love Luke. Luke 4 is one of my favorite, because in Luke 4, he's in the synagogue, right? And he reads from the scroll of Isaiah, chapter 61, verse 1, right? Not only does he misquote it, first of all, he's quoting from the Greek again. He doesn't know how to read Hebrew. They wouldn't have been reading a Greek in the synagogue, but that's what we have in the book. And he doesn't even match the Greek. If you compare what Jesus read in Isaiah 61 to the Greek Septuagint, all of our recensions, it doesn't match any of them. Like, Luke is making up new scripture as he goes. Not only that, it's clear. It is abundantly clear that when Jesus said, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing," that was a lie. Because in Isaiah 61, you only have to get to the 4th verse before you realize that this prophecy is about the restoration of Israel. And the anointed person is the one bringing the message of that restoration, probably the prophet himself, which is why it says, "They shall build up the ancient ruins, they shall raise up the former devastations, they shall repair the ruined cities, the devastations of many generations." But when Jesus was around, the Romans kicked their asses. Nothing got rebuilt. They were devastated in 70, and in the Bar Kokhba revolt under Hadrian, they got decimated. They got chased out of their land.
Can I jump in for a second? Because I want to make sure that we get to the death and resurrection, since that's the thing that Micah is most convinced by. But I'd like to try and experiment, and if this fails, I'll shut up again. I want to ask Justin a couple of questions, Micah, and see if you agree with his answer, because I don't know as much about this as Justin does, for sure. So,
Sounds good.
Do we know who translated the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek or Aramaic that Matthew then learned from?
You want to go first, Micah? I already know the answer.
It was a group of Jews in Egypt who were asked to put the Bible into the library there, if I understand correctly.
Well, you're close. The letter of Aristus explains that they wanted a copy of the Torah, not the entire Hebrew Bible, in their own language for the library. So they took 70, some traditions have more than 70, but 70 people who could translate from the Jewish people to translate it. And when they compared it, all 70 translations matched, which is wild because none of our translations match in the Greek Septuagint. That's why we've got a critical edition to show you all the differences. But that's the story. That's only for the Torah. We have no idea when the remaining books were translated. That's not part of the legend. The reality is, it's clear that they were kind of translated in pieces over time as people had need, which is why there's you can even find specific dialects. Like one book in the Torah translated into Greek will be a different dialect than another book of the Hebrew Bible translated into Greek.
So The other
Do we have
question
the
is,
whole thing in the Dead Sea Scrolls?
no,
No.
you
Old
don't have the
Testament in Greek?
Septuagint in the Dead Sea Scrolls. You have almost entirely Old Testament writings there. But the follow-up question that I had, and I may be wrong there, and Justin can correct me in a minute. We don't know who wrote the Gospel of Matthew. That name is a matter of tradition, so the authorship is dubious at best. Are all three of us in agreement on that?
I am.
I would give two caveats. Matthew doesn't identify himself in the text, but correct me if I'm wrong, but all the complete copies of Matthew we have all say the gospel according to Matthew on the first page if we had it. So it's signed outside of the copy, but not identified within the copy.
And the oldest copy that includes that is how far after the writing would have been?
400 years, roughly?
Yeah. So
300 to 400 years.
I think it might be slightly less than that, but yes. Here's the thing. Papias claims that Matthew put together the oracles of the Lord in the Hebrew language, and Justin's saying that Matthew definitely didn't understand Hebrew and instead relied on the Septuagint. So is Papias wrong?
I think the case that Matthew and Jesus were bilingual between Aramaic and Greek is good. But Hebrew and Aramaic are different languages. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, they're cousins.
Irenaeus says that Matthew wrote a gospel among the Hebrews in their own dialect while Peter and Paul were preaching at Rome and laying the foundations of the church. So both of them are claiming that Matthew either knew or wrote in Hebrew. Why
We don't
isn't
have any copy of that, do we?
Of Matthew?
In Aramaic or Hebrew, all the copies of Matthew we have are in Greek.
Indeed.
I don't know.
I mean, there are later copies into different languages, but I mean, of the early ones, yeah, they're all in Greek.
Yeah, I believe that Matthew was written originally in Greek.
Yeah, it seems to be the case.
So you disagree with Papias and Irenaeus? It's fine. I disagree with them too. So we found a point of agreement between us. My thing here is, if we don't know who wrote this, and I don't know how we can confirm who wrote the Gospel of Matthew, but we find issues in the text where it appears that he's relying on the Septuagint, and then he also adds things that don't seem to exist in any translation in order to make it appear that prophecy may have been fulfilled where it wasn't. I don't understand, where are you getting the notion that this is reliable? Because from the beginning, there are problems right down to who wrote this, what text did they rely on, and early church fathers. I mean, Papias was probably writing this around, the turn of the century, like around 100 or so, and is saying, oh yeah, Matthew, compiled this in Hebrew. And the literary evidence amongst scholars seems to reject that. Do we just trust the Bible and get rid of everything we've learned about language? Or do we trust what we've learned about language and perhaps put the Bible in doubt?
Well, we've only talked about the content of the Bible, not the transmission, because we do have fragmentary copies from much earlier, so that there's good evidence that this book called Matthew was being circulated in Greek much earlier than the copies that we have that exist. So
how does that answer my question?
I apologize. Would you say your question again? I know I'm going to cook myself on not answering your question exactly. Forgive me for that.
No. I'm in like the best mood I've been in months. The only question is, if we see problems with the text, which model? I'm narrowing you to two choices, and you're free to reject them both and put in a different thing. But to me, it's either we're stuck considering the Bible reliable despite demonstrated unreliability and questions regarding its authorship and source material, or we rely on what we've learned from historians and literary experts and say, there's problems here with Matthew, and that makes the book dubious at best. So we must find additional evidence to confirm that our plain or preferred reading is the one that's correct. Which of those do you lean towards?
Relying on the same rules of history for other books.
Why?
That
do we have other
Bible
history?
comes up-
Do we? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was kind of half done, and that's my fault for pausing.
Sorry.
When people, no, it's my fault. When people say, "Oh, we use the same standards that we do for other history books," to me, I find that to be pretty much bullshit. Because for other history books, by and large, the existence of the people writing it is irrelevant. Whether Plato's or Socrates were real or not is completely independent from the value of their words, and neither of them are making claims of magical, mystical realms, and neither of them are dying and rising again. And all of those other historical books where there are dying and rising saviors, well, I don't think theists that accept Jesus are going to be viewing those on the same footing. And so to say we view it in the same terms as other historical books seems wrong, because I'm not aware of any other historical book where, even if we assume that the person it's talking about was real, that they did supernatural things like turning water to wine and healing people with mud and walking on water and dying and rising again. We don't tend to accept that from other books, even if they're put in a historical context, do we?
That's true. Can you give an example of another book? You did list Plato and his related books, where we know the authors are closer than they are in the New Testament. I understand your question about the content of the New Testament being miraculous, but before talking about that, are there examples of books written closer to the original authors than the New Testament?
I can't give you an example, but Justin's,
one of those?
I can't give you an example, but Justin's nodding and may be able to. But I'd like to make the quick point, and then I'll turn it back over to Justin, that doesn't matter, because even if we had confirmation that Matthew was written by the Apostle Matthew and that he was in fact an eyewitness to the events, that in and of itself would not in any way confirm that Matthew's reporting is accurate and that the events occurred as described. It would certainly remove some of the nagging questions that skeptics like myself ask. But not only does it not matter to me how closely the oldest copy of Socrates' work is, or how close somebody was to him, it's because Socrates' existence or who wrote it is ultimately irrelevant. When I make a statement about skepticism, I am irrelevant. If somebody quotes me, it doesn't matter if they knew me or if they got the quote right. The only thing that matters is my statement about skepticism right? And so my only concern is, did Jesus in fact die and rise from the dead? And if he did, what's the best explanation for that? But I think Justin had an example.
Yeah, actually, I've got a bunch. So you're probably familiar with the Greek and Roman historians, right?
Somewhat. I've read Josephus.
Yeah. We've got a bunch of miraculous claims from Josephus, Herodotus, Pliny, Tacitus, Suetonius, Apollonius, Diodorus, Plutarch, so on and so forth. Some of them even including resurrections. Are you familiar with a figure named Aristeas?
No.
There's a really interesting young man named Aristeas that was famous in the pre-Roman era. He was written about in Book 4 of Herodotus' history. And he died in a fuller's shop. And he subsequently, his body vanished just like Jesus. And then he made appearances to multitudes and multitudes of people. So many so that they actually erected a statue of him and put it next to the statue of Apollos in the village where he was worshipped. And all kinds of historians wrote about this guy, some of them very close to the events that took place. It wasn't until much later that we find people casting a lot of skepticism on whether or not this individual rose from the dead. But like, there's actually quite a few people from the ancient world that like rose from the dead, did miracles and things like that. Like Tacitus Suetonius claimed that Emperor Vespasian healed a blind man by putting spit in his eyes in front of a whole multitude of witnesses. But like, I'm willing to bet you don't take any of these claims seriously. So I'm not sure that you're treating these claims with the same weight you would treat the biblical claims.
I apologize. What I was looking for was not an example of a text with miracles in it, but an example of a text that the transmission of that text, we have copies closer to the author than we have of the New Testament. Just straight up historical, transmission.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at some of the Roman histories. Like, I don't know what our oldest manuscript of Tacitus and Suetonius are, but I know they're quite archaic.
Okay, it's my understanding that the New Testament Gospels are it's easy to prove that we have them in the same condition that they were in the first century as those other old manuscripts. And I know that doesn't prove the content is true. I'm just saying that it seems like, using the normal rules of history, they've been transmitted to us as closely as other ancient books.
I have to interrupt, Micah. My apologies.
Sure.
I don't understand why that's relevant when I've already said that even if it was written by a direct eyewitness and we had complete confirmation of it, that wouldn't be relevant to whether or not it's true. And the entire thing that we're supposed to be doing in this call is you called in to explain why the Bible is reliable. And instead, what you seem to be doing is you think the Bible is reliable because it was written close to the time of the events. However, that is not sufficient to conclude that normal events are accurately reported, let alone extraordinary supernatural events. And so if you're going to do this event of saying, oh, I'm looking for examples of other books that were reported, where the events were recorded near the time, why does that make any difference to the reliability of the Bible? It isn't a question of, is the Bible more reliable than Socrates? The question is the Bible sufficiently reliable to conclude that the stories in it are true? That's the issue. That's the skepticism.
I agree. Thank you for that clarification. It's a necessary condition that it's copied correctly, but it's not sufficient to show what's true. And we can move on beyond that if you'd like to.
Well, it would be a necessary point of whether or not the copies we have are close to the original. I agree. I never said that we have copies that aren't close to the original and that would render it irrelevant. I'm just saying it seems strange to me that God is not protecting his word as his word supposedly says, because you're here arguing, well, we don't have originals and we don't necessarily know who wrote them, and we can't confirm the events from external evidence, but we have good reason to think that these events were reported close, temporally and proximally to the events at hand, and that means the current versions we have are likely to be pretty accurate. And I don't know, Justin might disagree with me. I would agree. I think the Bible that we currently have is pretty close to accurate to what the originals likely say in a number of facets, and it couldn't matter less to me.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually agree. Even if they were word for word, I don't think it matters.
Is the core of why I still believe it to be true is the fact that it's transmitted correctly. But we can move on beyond that. That isn't the end of it. It's what it says.
We should move on. I'll just note, if you pick up a copy of the Greek New Testament, I've got a critical edition here. And at the bottom of each page is a critical apparatus that shows you all the differences between the various manuscripts. Every page, there's dozens and dozens of manuscript variations. And you can look for yourself and see if there are meaningful variations or not meaningful variations. One meaningful variation that you might be interested in is from Mark chapter 1. In Mark chapter 1, he quotes from the wrong prophet. He says that Isaiah says something that Malachi said. And in later manuscripts, hundreds of years later, they actually correct that. There's quite a few differences like that you'll find when you're reading a critical edition.
Yeah, and most English translations will have footnotes right on the page that will show those also. It's actually one of the things that I have confidence that Christians aren't trying to hide that, because modern translations have those footnotes, and we'll show you where those issues are.
Modern translations only point out the large like some of the ones that are most well known. That's why you have critical editions that point out all of the variations. But that, again, that's not important because it doesn't say anything as to whether or not the contents of the book are true. And the reality is the contents of this book aren't true.
Yeah, that we can go to the content if you'd like to again.
I'd love to.
So before we do that, real quick, I want to make sure we're all on the same page here. Because so far, this has been great, and I think people are learning a lot, and I'm fat, dumb, and happy. Less fat, less happy, but dumber than I used to be. But not because of you guys. So before we continue down this road, if you guys are watching and you have questions, too bad. This is our opportunity to ask the questions, but you can interact in chat. You can also submit super chats, even though we're not going to be reading them today, but all the super chats today go to the Secular Student Alliance as part of the fundraiser that we're doing this weekend. So Micah and Justin, what I'm hearing right now is we find things about the gospel accounts. Justin and I find them dubious and unclear. And Micah seems to agree that that there are questions and our assessment of them is factual, but he concludes that they're still reliable. And now we're moving on to specific claims about the death and resurrection. And I just want to say in advance, if I were to concede that each of the differing accounts of the crucifixion and resurrection were in fact written by eyewitnesses that got elements of it wrong, would the Bible's account alone, should that be considered sufficient to conclude that Jesus was God in human form who died to sacrifice himself for sins and was resurrected in order to provide I like to use the phrase loophole, but I understand others don't, but a path to avoid damnation? And I guess that's the question, Micah. What about if I were to concede right now all the things that I think we're getting ready to argue about the reliability? And if I were to concede that there was a guy, his name was Jesus, he preached this stuff, and some of his disciples are reporting that he was killed and resurrected, would that be enough to conclude that he was in fact killed and resurrected in your mind?
Yes.
Okay, because it's not for me. And while I want to let you and Justin get in on the details of how reliable and accurate this is, because there's lots of little problems. Before we're done, I'd like to address the skeptical issue.
Sounds good.
Go ahead.
Micah?
Oh, sorry. Did you want me to start with where in the story?
I thought you had a new the next talking point.
Oh no, sorry. I just thought you were going to move through Matthew towards the resurrection. The only thing I would say is that I think Jesus set it up so that his whole claim to be God and able to give us eternal life is based on whether or not he could die or rise again. He set it up that way in the New Testament, so that if he didn't die and rise, he's not God, and if he did die and rise, he is. That's what he's claiming about himself.
I'm not sure that's meaningful though. Like for example, there are other people that rose from the dead, like Lazarus rose from the dead. He wasn't God, right? I'm not sure that Jesus rising from the dead entails that he is in fact God. In fact, many of the earliest Christians, like the Ebionites, believed in adoptionism, which would be that he was a begotten son of God in the same way David was a begotten son of God in Psalm 2. So I'm not sure that like the theological framework you're working from has to be universally accepted.
Okay. How about if someone can raise themselves from the dead while they're dead, then they're at least supernatural in some sense, whether that's an Ebionite demigod or whatever, that the ability to raise one's own self from the dead while being dead is significant.
It certainly
be
is significant, but I don't know how you would demonstrate that Jesus had the power to raise that, because like even Romans 10 says otherwise, right? Romans 10, 9 and 10.
All three members of the Trinity are described as rising Jesus from the dead at different places in the New Testament.
Yeah, so God raised him from the dead.
Yeah, because like let's imagine that there was a guy, Jesus, who said he would be raised from the dead, and he was raised from the dead. How do you show that he did it?
That no one else was around? I don't know. That's a good question.
It's a great question, and there no one else is around is something else that you can't prove or demonstrate, I'll point out. But this notion that somebody else can raise themselves from the dead when dead, in your view of the Trinity, has Jesus ever died? Has God ever died?
So by died even for us doesn't mean cease to exist, but cease to be alive on earth.
That's what I mean by it. And that's what the evidence shows. The evidence of it, all the available evidence suggests that when I die, I'm dead. Every single thing that's been attributed to a soul is either an identifiable function of a brain or not identifiably real. The supernatural stuff of, spirits and all that has not yet been confirmed. And the normative things, or the pedestrian things about consciousness and personality and all those things that one would attribute to a soul, I mean, those things are functions of the brain. But the issue is, if God has never died and Jesus did die, then Jesus isn't God. But I'm not going to say that, because I get that there's an equivocation fallacy there possibly with regard to what you're talking about with death. But the reason I raise it is you suggest if someone can raise themselves from the dead while being dead, except that I would think that whichever aspect of the Trinity was responsible for raising Jesus from the dead, it wasn't the dead Jesus.
So there's two pieces of that. One piece is the death. You're right. We have a difference of definition of what death is. The other half is that Jesus did say in John 10, I can lay my life down and I can pick it back up. So that's an example where Jesus is claiming to be the one who will raise himself from the dead.
Yeah, Micah, I never once asked whether or not Jesus claimed he could raise himself. I've read the Bible too. And while I don't know it nearly as well as seemingly either of you, my question had nothing to do with whether or not Jesus claimed something. It's about what your view is on the Trinity and whether a dead Jesus was in fact raising himself, or whether this Trinitarian concept, which is absurd and nobody can give a good description of it, is being used to claim that the dead Jesus resurrected himself, when what individuals really believe is that the non-dead Godhead, the seat of power, that Jesus repeatedly appears subservient to, whether or not that God did it. That was my question, not whether or not Jesus said it.
I think Jesus raised himself from the dead is a fair way of saying it. I also believe in the Trinity, so I'm not sure I can pick between those two things, and I apologize for that.
That's fine. I just wanted clarity. So we're back to still, you're trying to tell us. So my question was about go ahead.
So Jesus rising from the dead isn't the simplest explanation, a la Occam's razor, but the simplest explanation that accounts for all of the details. That the story, as told in the New Testament, requires a resurrection to make sense.
No, it doesn't.
Which parts of it?
A report of a resurrection does not require a resurrection. There have been other reports of resurrection that you don't think are real. And so to say that it requires a resurrection is clearly not the case. It's possible for there to be claims of a resurrection even when no resurrection has occurred, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. So if it's possible for claims of resurrection to not be true, then the issue is, how do we determine that this particular one is true? Because if you're saying, which, I mean, you answered my question earlier when I said a report from an eyewitness is enough to conclude without additional evidence, empirical or otherwise, that's enough to conclude that someone was raised from the dead. And I don't know how you can accept that while rejecting other claims of miraculous resurrections from other sources that also don't have evidence, and then claim, oh, this one only makes sense if it actually happened. Isn't that true for all of them?
I don't think it's true for all of them, because I think any miracle claim has to be evaluated in and of itself. Proving that 99% of miracles aren't true doesn't prove that miracles can't happen. It makes it unlikely.
I'm so confused.
So what's the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead?
That all of the, not only the disciples as eyewitnesses, but the fact that there were guards at the tomb.
How do we know
that?
We don't know any of that to be true. That's if you believe the account, which we obviously don't.
Okay. So is there anything that could... That's why I spent so long talking about whether it's been transmitted correctly. But going back to the original question, even if the events, they are true as recorded, like what could convince you that they were true? Is there anything that could convince you that a resurrection did happen?
I know what I would find convincing if that guy who resurrected was written about by people outside of the actual religion. Like we have other resurrection accounts. We've got resurrection accounts of Nero, Ramses II, Aristius, all kinds of people.
So I get asked a lot what would change my mind about this stuff. And quite frankly, the answer from Arthur C. Clarke, that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and the foundational principles of skepticism are such that I would be happy to accept strong evidence for a resurrection, but that is independent from how the resurrection occurred. So even if I did a debate with Mike Licona on the resurrection, where he suggested that somebody cut his head off and we all went in the other room and he came walking with his head reattached, even that wouldn't be enough to convince me. And I was like, I would definitely, if we had, the ability to examine it and medically confirm stuff, I would definitely believe you'd been resurrected, but that doesn't tell me how you've been resurrected. And so here we're in this position where there are unsigned gospels that we don't necessarily know who wrote them. We don't have the originals. We have pretty good reason to think that they're accurate in the broad details and maybe some of the minor details in the story. And so even if we grant all of that, now we get a story. And the story alone is not enough for me to even conclude, first of all, the story alone is not enough for me to conclude that this individual existed, although I'm happy to agree that he did. I'm not a mythicist. But I would say it's insufficient to that. But it's definitely insufficient to determining that a resurrection actually occurred. But even if I were to grant, yes, I believe Jesus was resurrected, that is, the Bible alone is not sufficient to determine how he was resurrected or whether any of the other things in the Bible are true. If I give you a list of 10 things and I show that 7 of them are true, you're not just going to believe the other 3 just because they came to me. I mean, that's absolutely fallacious. And so when you ask, is there anything that would convince you? I would be convinced of a resurrection if there was evidence for a resurrection beyond just a claim of a resurrection. And I would be convinced that Jesus, in some way or another, actually resurrected himself, whether through the Godhead or whatever, if there were actual evidence for that. But all we have is a claim, which you've already acknowledged we cannot justify with anything external. And I find it strange that someone like yourself, who seems well studied on the facts and generally reasonable in acknowledging points, how is it that you can look at this particular package of claims and say, this is good enough to conclude that God is real and raised Jesus from the dead, when you have no ability to investigate any of it and you have no more evidence for it than you have for anything else? You just have a book that you find more reliable for reasons you shouldn't.
So the question is, how can you conclude when there's no evidence outside of the Bible?
Right.
And my answer to that would be that the fact that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John ended up believing it is why they're Christians and why it's coming from Christian sources.
So
People
basically
who
you
believed it-
described a bunch of bias that you can't prove as well. So you're saying that because these individuals supposedly believed it, that's good enough. And yet, is it possible for them to believe it and be wrong?
Yeah, that could have been the case.
How did you rule out that as the more probable explanation, that they were just wrong?
The fact that they all believed it makes the possibility of a group hallucination pretty low probability. I know the probability of a miracle is low, but the probability of a group hallucination that they all believed that is also low.
We don't know that the whole group saw the resurrected Jesus. That's something, again, that you would only believe if you thought that the Bible is 100% true.
Yeah, the argument becomes circular when you say, oh, I believe this because in the Bible, and I believe the Bible is reliable because of the Bible, and I believe that everybody saw it and believed because that's what the Bible says. The Bible, in the narrative, for example, I did a video about doubting Thomas and how it's there as an obvious narrative plot that actually makes no sense and is just a way to provide an excuse for why good evidence isn't presented. And once again, trust me, Micah, you're my favorite caller for weeks, if not months. But what you're doing is just saying, oh, it seems reliable and I can't believe these people would lie. And I think I have an accurate thing, but you have no way to demonstrate that. Even if I granted the copies that we have today are translated correctly, they are true as is necessary to the source material, and that we have good reason to think that, for example, these were written by eyewitnesses. And I said, all of that is enough to convince me that they sincerely believe Jesus was raised from the dead. That alone isn't sufficient to conclude.
I would say that it would be circular, except that it starts with the Bible being historically just reliable as any other history. And then we can find out who Jesus is. And then you do end up chasing it back into a circle, but it doesn't start with it being true in the higher sense, but true historically. Then looking at the content can demonstrate that it's true in a capital T truth sense.
But it says so many things that are not true. Like, what percentage of the Bible has to be true before we say it's trustworthy? Because I don't think it's trustworthy, and there's hundreds and hundreds of errors in this book.
I would say that, like the examples of the genealogy in Matthew, I think that there are reasonable ways of looking at that as an intentional thing Matthew was doing, where he's not lying, but even the original readers have known that there weren't the 14 generations there. They were Jews too.
No.
They knew how many
The original
generations
reader wouldn't
there
know that.
were.
Most Christians don't know that because they're not reading the Bible any more than ancient Jews, where ancient Jews couldn't mostly read. A literacy rate of maybe 7% if you're in a major metropolitan area, but even lower after that. They're not going back. And plus, they were mostly Aramaic. They're not going back to check the Hebrew old scrolls.
I think even oral cultures would have had those genealogies available to them in their language. They would have noticed the same thing we notice about Matthew, that that the 14 generations didn't match up.
No, because the people who actually memorized the Hebrew Bible, the people who actually went to school to learn it, and actually trained under rabbis, they wouldn't be reading any of this Greek New Testament nonsense. The Jews rejected Jesus. The message of Jesus was rejected by the Jews, which is why all the New Testament is written in Greek rather than in Aramaic. The writings of the Jews continued on in Hebrew and Aramaic, not in Greek. This is a Gentile religion.
Do you think Jews in the first century didn't know Greek and Aramaic? They were under Roman occupation. Don't you think they spoke some Greek to be able to interact with their Roman overlords?
Minimal Greek. They're not picking up a Greek text or having Greek dialogues on daily. Certainly, they could speak some Greek, but the day-to-day average Jew in the first century would have been speaking Aramaic.
There's examples in the New Testament stories of Jesus talking to centurions and other Roman officials that seem to indicate to me that they spoke Greek. And I've lived in South America, and I know that even being illiterate doesn't mean you can't be bilingual. And I think the case that they spoke Aramaic
Yes, it
and
does.
Greek is high.
If you're illiterate, you're not bilingual.
Oh, I know lots
Yeah,
of
that's
illiterate
true.
people who are bilingual.
Yeah, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
the reality.
The fact that you can't write doesn't mean that you can't comprehend. So, my correction.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's what I mean.
But the thing is,
Yeah, no,
you can be conversational in something, and I don't necessarily consider you bilingual. But anyway, that doesn't matter. In Matthew, the genealogy is 14 generations. What is the average? How far back can we trace our ancestry lineage right now?
I can do 4 generations to my great-grandparents.
Yeah. And by and large, if you go to genealogy services, they can get back to the 1500s, which is just shy of or right around 14 generations or so. Do you find it at all remarkable that the Gospel of Matthew, whoever wrote it, had access to that genealogy? And did anybody have any way at the time to verify that that was accurate?
Those genealogies come out of 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles with minor modifications. So anyone with access to the Old Testament in Matthew's day could have put together the genealogy that's there.
Except that the people who tried to put together 2 different genealogies in the different Gospels. But the other part of the question was, does anybody have any way of verifying those things are true? Because it seems to me that while you wanted to skip to the New Testament, because there are tons of Old Testament problems right from the first chapter of Genesis, you also skipped the fact that that genealogy relies on and counts on the Old Testament being reliable. What reason do we have to think that the Old Testament is reliable?
The reason I trust the Old Testament is that I trust the New Testament. I don't argue back forward, and that's why.
And you trust trust the New Testament because you trust the Old Testament. How is that not?
No, I don't.
Absolutely.
No, I don't.
Literally, when I asked you about that genealogy, you said that they know it because of the Old Testament, and now you're saying you trust the the New Testament because of the Old Testament, and the Old Testament because of the New Testament. What about that is incorrect?
I didn't say that I trust it because of the Old Testament, but that if anyone had access to the Old Testament, they could produce the genealogy in Matthew. That's all I was arguing.
So we have a genealogy, and you're saying that someone with access to the Old Testament could produce it. And I said, what was the reason that we should consider the Old Testament genealogy reliable? And you said that you believe it because you believe the New Testament.
Yeah, if I said that, I apologize. I should not have said that.
Okay, that's what I heard. So why do you think the Old Testament genealogy is reliable?
Well, maybe you are going to get me to say what you got me to say the first time. Because I believe Jesus rose from the dead, then I am more likely to trust the other pieces of the story that I don't have direct evidence for.
And would you acknowledge also that this is a fully circular argument, that you rely on you view the Old Testament as reliable because of your pre-belief on the resurrection of Jesus, which is conditioned on the reliability of the New Testament, which you tie back to the Old Testament?
I wouldn't put the Old Testament where you put it in the loop.
I'm sorry.
I would start with...
Where in the loop should it be put before you'll acknowledge that the loop is a fucking circle?
I would say that my initial affirmation of the New Testament is not that it is completely true, but just that it's historically reliable.
I'm sorry.
And
Did I say
because
anything at all about whether it was completely true? I'm asking about why should we consider the genealogy in Matthew reliable? And the only answer you gave wasn't actually about how reliable it is, but that anybody could have looked at that genealogy in the Old Testament. And I did the natural thing, which assumed you were saying that's how we know the New Testament is reliable. Turns out you don't mean that. And so when I ask why you think the Old Testament genealogy is reliable, it's because you believe that he was resurrected. I'd like to know how that's not a circular argument.
maybe it is. Maybe it is a circle.
Cool. Do you care whether or not your beliefs are true more than you care about whether or not they're comforting?
Yes.
Cool. How would you demonstrate the truth of your beliefs?
So, for the Old Testament being preserved, don't we have copies from the Dead Sea Scroll that predate the New Testament, so that we don't have someone making up the Old Testament out
Micah?
of whole cloth?
Micah, I didn't say anything about the Old Testament being preserved. Let's assume for a second that even our best version, our best versions of the Old Testament are great preservations. I asked about how you would demonstrate that it's true. Not that it's consistent, not that it's internally consistent. There are plenty of fictional books and world building that goes on where it's internally consistent. And there are plenty of books where the newest copies are almost, if not exactly identical to the originals. I asked about, you said you cared more about whether it's true. I didn't ask anything at all about whether it's consistent to the original. I want to know how you can show it's true.
Yeah, you can disagree with what I've said. The way that I answer that question is that I trust that the New Testament is historically reliable, tells us about Jesus, that he would die and rise. And
then you're not being truthful, Micah. Micah, then you're not being truthful, because you do not care more about whether your beliefs are true if, when asked how you know they're true, you just say, I believe they're reliable. That's not a path to truth.
I'm not sure if we're going to get any farther, because I do think that I've laid out again why I believe, and I understand it's not compelling to you.
Micah,
I get that.
If I told you that I believe that the Quran is true, and you said, why do you believe the Quran is true? And I said, well, I'm not saying I believe it's true in all things, but I believe it's true about Muhammad being the final prophet of Allah. And you said, why do you believe that's true? And I said, because I find the stories believable. Is that in any way an answer to how I determined it was true?
It is only true if, it's only compelling if you can show why you think the stories about Muhammad are true.
No, that's not the question I asked. The question I asked.
Sorry, what was the question?
Was, if I were to tell you, if you said, how did you determine that the Quranic claims are true? And I said, I determined that they're true because I found them convincing. Is that in any way an answer that shows a reliable path to truth? Or is it, in fact, just a restatement that I find it true? Cool. Then how is your answer to my question anything other than a restatement that you find it true? I'd like to know the method by which we can show that it's true.
And my answer is, I find the eyewitness testimony in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John about Jesus' resurrection.
I'm sorry, Micah. I didn't ask for your opinion about what you find to be true. I asked for the method whereby which we can show it to be true. So once again, you are just restating the fact that you are convinced it's true. I'm asking, what method can we use to, in fact, show that it's true?
How about the historical method? Is that a method?
How does the historical method in any way demonstrate that a claim of a resurrection is true?
I don't think that there's any way we can prove whether Jesus rose from the dead or not using any other method but the historical method.
No. You don't get to do not using any method other than the historical method. I thought you were admitting something. So let me just say, you just did the grossest bait and switch of this entire conversation. You're saying, I don't think there's any way but the historical method. My question was not, is there any way other than the historical method? My question is the historical method sufficient to conclude that a resurrection occurred?
I would say yes, it is.
Okay, then why do you reject all of the other resurrections from all of the books outside of Christianity?
Because first of all, I haven't examined all of them, but the ones I've examined don't. The historical method doesn't show that they happened.
How does the historical method?
Not good evidence for it.
How does the historical method? This is my last question.
Sorry.
How does the historical method demonstrate that a resurrection occurred rather than merely demonstrating that a resurrection was claimed to have occurred?
The stories that we have show, I think that's the best explanation for the stories as recorded in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
So that's a non-answer. I'm done.
So did Joseph Smith receive some golden tablets from the angel Moroni as verified by 11 witnesses?
No, I don't.
Oh, but it's historical. There are 11 witnesses, and we know Joseph Smith for a fact existed.
Yeah. And I think you should examine Islam and Mormonism using the historical method. I do think that's the right way to determine whether they're true or not.
Well, how did the historical method tell you that Jesus rose from the dead, but we didn't actually receive golden tablets from the angel Moroni?
Because when you have a trial with witnesses, there are ways of telling whether the witnesses are telling the truth or not that have to be examined on a per-trial basis, not for all trials at once.
Well, as it turns out, we've got the witnesses. Hold on, I'll get them for you.
Sure.
Right here in the Book of Mormon, I've got a copy, obviously. There's 11 witnesses. They give written testimony of the actual tablets. It starts out with the testimony of the 8, Krisha Whitmer, Jacob Whitmer, Peter Whitmer, John Whitmer, Hiram Page, Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, Samuel Smith, and then there's actually additional witnesses listed out, and they give you their account. All you got to do is read it. It's in history, man. They were martyred for their faith. That must be true. They wouldn't die for a lie.
So the witnesses actually of the Book of Mormon don't say that they saw the plates with their physical eyes, but spiritual eyes, and they did apostatize within their lifetimes.
No, that's actually not true of all of them. And I'm not saying that the witnesses were martyred. I'm saying Joseph and his brother were martyred.
Well, they were killed trying to escape jail. I'm not sure I would count that as a martyrdom.
And Jesus died trying to escape the Romans. And then they wrote later that he predicted it. The reality is,
I think that we have to examine the story of Joseph Smith and the witnesses on the face of the evidence of those witnesses.
No, I don't think you do. I think you should treat the evidence of Joseph Smith the same way you would treat any other mythological evidence and tell it to go away. It's Harry Potter 3:16. It's not valuable for anything. The reality is the Bible makes so many false claims that there's no money on earth that could convince me to believe that the historical method would lead to Jesus Christ resurrecting when that sky carcass didn't fulfill a single messianic prophecy. Zero. None. Not one. The New Testament is nothing but lies about the Old Testament. Hebrews chapter 9 famously says that there was no forgiveness without the shedding of blood. Lie. Huge lie. There's all kinds of forgiveness in the Old Testament without the shedding of blood. Leviticus chapter 5 says you can give a tenth of an ephah of fine flour and get forgiveness for your sin. Jesus didn't have to die for nothing. It's a fictitious story to explain why their chosen Messiah wasn't the Messiah and he actually died. They made up stories saying, well, no, actually he had to die because, and then they listed a whole series of copes.
So
I think
I'm gonna
yeah.
Go ahead and answer that, Micah. I'm sorry.
Jesus dying and rising is a claim to be able to deal with our death, which ends everything. If there isn't life after death, then the whole conversation we're having ultimately doesn't matter because there is nothing after we die. And it's
I agree.
possible
There's
that's
nothing
true.
after we die.
But would
And
you agree?
it's
I lied,
possible.
Micah, because I have a follow-up question, and what you just said is, sorry, but offensively ridiculous. Do you think this life matters whether there's a God or not?
If I'm going to, no, because if I'm going to die and the sun's going to burn out and the universe will go to the end, the ultimate meaning doesn't exist.
So I'm not saying that there is ultimate or intrinsic meaning or anything. Do you think my life matters to me right now, even though I absolutely don't believe there's a God?
Yes, I believe you when you say that.
Why is that not enough? And why do you pretend that it's useless when even if life ends and it's over, and even if the universe experiences heat death, when I ate lunch today, I'm just going to poop it out. I'm going to use up the substance of that. I'm going to poop it out. That doesn't mean my lunch was a waste. When the car that's in my driveway is eventually going to rust and decay into absolutely nothing, but that doesn't mean it's not useful to me right now. I care about the one and only life I know we're going to get. There is not only no good reason to think that there's an afterlife, there are good reasons to think there is no such thing as an afterlife. And yet you are advocating for religious ideas, and maybe you're one of the fine, upstanding, queer-friendly, Christian-y types, whatever. But it's undeniable that the beliefs of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, all of these impact the quality of your life now and the decisions you make now and how you treat others and what rights you are willing to grant to others. So you don't get to hand wave away the entirety of existence. The only thing that we know for sure we're getting, this life, and say, oh, no, the only thing that really matters is the afterlife. And if there's not an afterlife, the rest of this is just a waste. I'm sorry, but fuck that. My life is not a waste just because your fantasy isn't real.
I think that your worldview allows you to find meaning in it. I just can't see how you, from outside of your understanding of the universe, I couldn't see meaning if I believed what you believed.
What meaning are you looking for? Do you, if you found out tomorrow that you're wrong and that there is no God, would you want to keep living and exploring and learning in the universe?
Probably.
That's the answer. That's the whole fucking answer. To learn more about how things actually work instead of pretending that we know how they work. To learn about the origins of the universe instead of writing mythical books that get it wrong. To learn about the full scope of human psychology, sexuality. To learn about what kind of foods there are. To learn what other people have learned. To hear their stories. To watch K-pop Demon Hunters or whatever you want to watch. To go to a gay pride festival. To go to a KKK rally if you want to. And do the sorts of things where you get to figure out what in this world matters most to you and the people that you care about. Why isn't that enough? Why isn't it the fact that there's a beautiful garden enough for you without thinking there's a God that could have made it orgasmic to the point of killing you to merely look at a flower, but only made it really beautiful? Why do you have to add to reality instead of just appreciating reality?
The reason why is I want to be able to say that attending that KKK rally is wrong, but that other things
I can say that
are right.
Actually, I don't think it's wrong to attend a KKK rally. I think the KKK ideals are wrong. One could go, for example, I go to church. I go to church. I attend churches frequently, despite the fact that I disagree with them. Granted, I shouldn't say frequently now. It's been a while, but I don't think there's something necessarily wrong because I know an African American who goes to KKK rallies and tries to get them out of the KKK. So it depends on your motivation. I would say it's wrong to be an active member of the KKK and agree with their ideology, because that ideology absolutely, demonstrably makes the world worse.
Yeah. Well,
I don't need a God for that.
We agree about that.
I don't need a God for that, and I don't understand why you do. Like if you found out tomorrow that God wasn't real, not only, I mean, you said you'd want to keep living, would you still be opposed to racism?
I don't know. I can only see things from the point of view where I am. I have a hard time.
That's pretty sad. I hope you find a way to get past that. We're gonna have to wrap this call up because I want to get on to other calls as well. But I appreciate the call, Mike. We'd both be happy to. Imagine I'm speaking for Justin now, but I think we'd both be happy to speak with you again. But I really don't understand.
I'd love to talk to you guys again. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, please, much appreciated. I just do not understand the notion that nothing's good enough unless there's a God, or I can't come up with a reason to not rape and kill and be awful to people unless there's a God to keep me from doing it. That type of thinking makes no sense to me. And I have to, right now, based on my perspective, and I get you're doing it from yours, I have to think that this is indoctrinated poison that has polluted your mind and the mind of billions of other believers to prevent them from seeing the obvious, that morality is really much easier than religions make it. And that is, even if I was purely selfish, even if I only cared about me, it's in my best interest to oppose racism. It's in my best interest to oppose bigotry. It's in my best interest to work together with people. We know this from game theory. We don't need to know it from a God. It doesn't have to be morally wrong from a God on high if it is contrary to a good and productive life that benefits everybody. I don't know why that's not enough, but maybe we'll talk about it next time. Thanks, Micah.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Have a good one, Micah.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
I'll give him that. He was one of the more polite guests that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it's there's a billion questions. You could have a conversation with somebody like Micah right up until, I don't know, somebody's mind gets changed, if it's likely.
Mm-hmm.
But if the questions are, oh, what would change your mind? I don't know. But something changed or you think something changed your mind. Tell me what it was. Oh, my mind was changed, or I became convinced when I found the Gospels reliable. Okay, what's the demonstration that they're reliable? Well, they were written close to the events. Okay, I don't know why that makes them reliable. I also don't know how you know. I mean, yes, we know that if, for example, Papias refers to the Gospel according to Matthew around 90 to 100 CE, then we can be confident that the Gospel he's referring to was written prior to that, although I think Matthew's dated kind of late to like 80, 85 or something, right?
Yeah, so that's the thing is Mark is the earliest, and he's typically dated just past 70. And the reality is, if they're all copying from Mark, they had to have come after 70. And even with the quotations we've got from Papias, we don't actually have any writings from him. We've got quotations of him from Eusebius in the 4th century.
Is it Papias, and you've just been sitting there patiently not correcting me the whole time?
It's okay. It happens.
No, it's not. I hate being wrong. So it's Papias, right? That's the correct pronunciation?
Yeah.
I've said it wrong for 20 fucking years.
But, you know, a lot of people don't mind, like, even the correct pronunciation of Tacitus is actually Tacitus, but in the West, we just say Tacitus because we soften the C. So, like, you know.
I live in Austin, Texas, and Texas, of course, used to be Mexico. And there's quite a few people of Mexican heritage here. And so there are plenty of place names in Austin that are of Spanish origin. Unfortunately, the white folks around here named those places and then pronounced those places the way they wanted to, irrespective. So there's literally a street called Guadalupe instead of Guadalupe. But Guadalupe, there's there's all kinds of streets and things around here that are just like, these are some backwoods Texas folks who are just like, I saw it, I read it wrong the first time, but that's what we're going to call it forever. Welcome to Guadalupe Street.
It's wrong, but I'm going to double down.
That's right. Happiest. Burn that into your brain, motherfucker. All right. Oh, see, I hadn't dropped a motherfucker the whole thing, but at least I was talking to me and not a caller. So, I mean, that's growth. All right. Muhammad is calling from Texas.
MF ain't so bad.
I know that there's some people who are more concerned with style than substance, and they get really bothered by certain language. And I think it's silly, but I'm trying to make sure that I don't give them the excuse to run away. But Muhammad's calling from Texas, wants to talk about the signs in the Quran. Hey, Muhammad, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, how you doing today?
Not bad.
Yeah, so I'm here today. I heard the other conversation with the guy before. There's a couple things. I don't want to focus on it too much, but the Quran was basically brought down to fix the errors that are in the Torah and the Bible.
How do you know that?
Well, the Quran explains that. So
Okay, so
there's
you're
a bunch of
saying
errors
you believe that's true because the Quran says it.
Yes.
So isn't that a circular argument that you believe the Quran was sent down to fix the problems in the Torah because the Quran says that's what it's for?
So you're saying it's a circular argument in which way?
I'm asking you if you think it's a circular argument.
No, I don't. Because the whole idea here is that it's brought down, each book is brought down to teach a lesson. And a lesson here is that
Muhammad, whatever you're doing, I need you to stop it because it sounds like you're dragging your mic across the pavement and it's really bad audio for the show. So
okay, I'm just getting set up a little nice. Let me put my I can put like headphones on, it might be a little better.
oh, okay. I'm like, in any case, the question, hopefully you can hear me, is you said the Quran was sent down to accomplish X, and you believe that because it's in the Quran. By definition, a circular argument is one that contains the conclusion and the premise, which is exactly what the informal argument that you just presented did. You are concluding that this is the purpose of the Quran because the Quran says so. It's not completely circular because you're not saying the Quran is reliable because it says it's reliable, but you're saying it has this purpose because it says it has this purpose.
No, I'm saying the Quran is reliable because you're bringing it back to the thing. You're saying, how do we check if something's reliable? We check if something's reliable if we connect it to something that is factual or that we can have evidence of right here, correct?
Yes. So the claims in the book itself, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, or the science book down the street, are claims, and they need to be the reliability of those claims need to be demonstrated by evidence.
All right. So basically, the evidence here, I'm going to name a few evidence. I'm going to go off first the signs that we see in our everyday life, and then the signs that we see in history of our architecture. So we can see like Petra. We can see like the Dead Sea.
I'm sorry,
we see
Muhammad. I had difficulty. Muhammad, I'm sorry, I had difficulty understanding. You said the signs of architecture, like buildings.
Like buildings. Like I'm talking about the pyramids is one of them. Pharaoh, the people of Pharaoh. It talks about in the Quran repeatedly about the people that were destroyed beforehand. So it talks about the people who were wronged, that were doing wrong, and they got destroyed. So these are signs of our book. So like the Noah's Ark, this is, I'm not sure exactly the details of this, but they found the Noah's Ark, the Petra. These different, or like
Muhammad, those are claims, not signs.
Yeah. So for example, so just for clarity, because I mean, genuinely, I'd like to let you get to this, and I'm going to let you try to, but I don't understand what you mean by signs in the Quran being verified by architecture. Does the Quran talk about architecture in some sort of predictive manner?
No, it talks about travel through the earth and see through the combs, the people that were destroyed beforehand.
How does architecture tell us? Okay. I'm gonna let you continue because right now it's not making any sense. So go ahead.
So like, give me one moment.
What are you looking up
right now, Mohammed? It's happening right now.
Basically, if you look at now look at the pyramids. The pyramids, we don't know how they were developed, correct?
No, we do.
First, hello?
Are you answering another phone call? So, here, let me return you to the queue. What? That wasn't your phone that was beeping, and then you said hello?
No, I was seeing if y'all were still on the line. not
Yes.
answering
So
another phone call. I
here
got
we
to
are.
vibrate.
So listen to me. While we do not know, in the sense that we don't have a time machine and can't verify specifically exactly how the pyramids were built, we do have reliable information and good models that suggest how it might have been built. But what is it about the pyramids' existence and architecture that confirms the Quran is true?
Because they talked about in the Quran that there's people that were destroyed beforehand that were way more advanced than us, and it explains the stories of. So you have Pharaoh, and it explains that how his comb, his people got devastated, and then you have
I'm
Nuh,
sorry.
and it shows that how his comb was
I'm sorry.
devastated. And he talks
Nothing you're
about the people
talking
of the
about is
mountain.
architecture. You're telling me that one story seems to be consistent with another story that the authors of the Quran would have already known about. What about the architecture of the pyramid confirms the Quran?
Not the architecture. I'm talking about the signs. The pyramids are the sign of the people that got destroyed. That's the architectural
No,
piece.
so
that shows
Muhammad,
that
first of all, Muhammad,
make
you don't
sense?
get to do. First of all, Muhammad, you don't get to do that. But second of all, that's not true. I specifically asked repeatedly to make sure we were talking about this. You talked about this being architecture confirming the Quran, and my question for the third time now is, what is it about the pyramid architecture that proves the Quran is true?
I'm talking about the building. I might misuse the word, but I'm talking about the building. The building is
Okay.
a sign because
What is
that
it about?
building,
What is
we
it
have no
about?
knowledge
What
of how
is it
it's built.
about? What is it about? What is it about the pyramid that proves the Quran is true? The pyramid which predates the Quran, by the way. Hello?
I'll tell you right now. All right, so the Quran was made. Okay, so it talks about Haman that he kindled a fire upon clay and built a lofty tower.
Muhammad.
So when we look at the
Muhammad.
look, can you hear me?
Yes, I can,
Yeah.
and now I don't want to. So I want you to listen to me very carefully. This is not a show for you to call in and preach. We're trying to get to why something is true. And you called in to specifically say that something about the pyramids confirms the truth of the Quran. I don't need you to tell me background stories and side stories. I need you to make an evidence-based argument that shows that the pyramids, the existence of the pyramids, which I'm still talking, the existence of the pyramids, which predate the Quran, confirm the truth of the Quran.
So it explains how it's made.
What explains how it's made?
In the Quran, in verse 28, 38, and
So
verse
the book
40,
that was written centuries, if not millennia, after the construction of the pyramids, you think it tells how the pyramids were made?
Yeah.
And my answer is, even if it does, so what? I can tell you about Alexander Graham Bell inventing the telephone. That doesn't mean that the telephone confirms the truth of my other stories.
Well, no, what I'm trying to explain to you here is it's a sign that the people, okay, so every society, this is how it is. The Quran comes as a mercy and a warning to humankind. It's basically every society goes through phases.
Muhammad.
And in these phases, basically what happens if you let me finish.
Muhammad. Yeah. I'm not going to let you finish. As I explained a moment ago, this is not the show for you to call in and preach bullshit about the Quran. This is a show for you to demonstrate that it's true.
I'm not trying to preach bullshit.
I'm sorry, but you keep interrupting me when I'm trying. So are you going to keep interrupting me? Because I've been so good this whole show, and I'd like to maintain my zen, but I keep asking you to prove the very thing that you did. And I used the specific terms and issues. Why are you grumbling? Why are you whining? Why can't you just answer the question and say, what confirms the truth of the Quran? What about the pyramids confirms the truth of the Quran? It doesn't matter what the Quran says about how they were built. It doesn't matter what the Quran says about ancient civilizations. It doesn't matter what you've interpreted about cycles or anything else. What I need to know is, what about the existence of the pyramid confirms the truth of the Quran?
Okay, let's move on to the next thing.
No,
okay,
let's move on to the next.
My points.
Nope, I'm going to mute you. I'm not going to hang up on you. I would have definitely hung up on you, because at this point, it's very clear that you're either calling in to waste our time, or you're someone who's calling in who is unequipped to be able to address these questions, at least with me. And I recognize that that might be my fault, because all I'm asking is, how do we know it's true? And what seems to be happening is, not only did you start off with a completely circular position, but now you're expanding it to be, there's these peripheral things about the narrative within the Quran that talks about fallen civilizations. So I only have one question left, and then I will leave it up to Justin to find out how we go from here. So I'm going to unmute you. Muhammad, are you ready for my final question?
Go ahead.
I'm actually going to hold off, because
Go ahead.
I'm saving it. I'm going to let Justin dig in on this.
Okay.
Muhammad, what
Hello,
percentage
Justin.
of the Quran is true?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, what percentage of the Quran is true?
100%.
Yeah. And what does Muhammad say about testing the Quran?
Hold on.
In the Hadith, not in the
Testing?
Quran.
No,
Yeah, he
let's
says
focus on
test the Quran
right
if
now,
there's,
because the hadith,
and if there's one,
we
and
can.
if there's one false thing in it, then it's not, none of it's true. Want to show?
Yeah, I agree
Want me
with you
to
on
like
that.
give you some examples of like stuff in the Quran that's just patently false?
Okay, tell me.
Sure. We have a really interesting passage in chapter 67 that it says, is using the royal we. God refers to himself in the we often in the Quran. It says, "We adorned the lowest heavens with stars like lamps and made them as missiles for stoning eavesdropping devils." Do you think stars fall to the earth and kill devils, evil people?
Can you tell me that verse again, just so I can read it in Arabic?
Yeah, it's 67:5.
All right. This is al-Mulk. وقد
There's
زينا
actually
السماء
there's actually
الدنيا
two problems in the passage.
بمصابيح. Huh?
I said there's
Well,
two
because
problems in
I
this
don't want to
passage.
lose on the
One, the
translation.
stars are not in the lowest heavens, and number two, they're not missiles for attacking entities on the earth.
Punishment of the blaze. We have certainly beautified the nearest heavens with the stars, and have made from them what is thrown at the devils, and have prepared for them the punishment of the blaze.
This was 67
So,
what?
67:5.
67:5. So there's some verses that we're not going to know the exact translation, but I can go to tafsir. Let me give you tafsir.
Can I ask real quick? If we don't know the correct translation, how can you be sure that it's 100% true?
Because, like, you know the pulsar star?
The what?
There's a surah in the Quran that
The
explains the pulsar star. It's talking about the knocking star. And it explains
Oh,
sorry.
you don't
because
want to do that talking point.
our
I'm
knowledge-
sorry. I said, no, the question, it's like you don't listen to the question. If we don't know what a particular passage means, how can you be confident that it's 100% true?
Well, I'm trying to explain to you another example in a verse that I can
I
explain.
don't need
to you
another
why
example
this
in
example
another
is true.
verse.
Does that make sense?
I'm pointing, this is, the Quran is irrelevant to this. If I point to a passage in any book, how can I say that that passage is 100% true if,
Let me ask you this.
please stop trying to interrupt me, because then it starts to feel like you're just being an ass on purpose. And I don't need that. Take any passage from any book, anywhere. And if we do not have a good understanding of the accurate translation of it, how could we ever say it's 100% correct? That's the question.
So can I respond now?
Okay.
So-
I'm gonna mute you again, Muhammad. I'm sorry. I'm actually not sorry. I'm happy to treat you like a preschooler if you're going to act like a preschooler. When I stop you from interrupting me and I ask you the question and I say, that's the question, and then I stop talking, when you say So is it okay for me to answer now? You look either trollish or ridiculously silly, because anybody who has a normal conversation knows that I just asked a question and said, that's the question, and then paused. That's not the point where you do this. And I'm sure that when I take you off hold, if I hadn't preempted it by saying this, you'd probably whine about how I'm not letting you finish, because that's the most common thing that happens. Once again, I'd like you to answer that question. So yes, when I take you off mute, you can answer that question.
When I go on to say something, I don't mean to interrupt you. Sometimes I see where you're headed towards, and I'm trying to explain where I'm coming from.
I'm sorry, Mohammed.
maybe
Did
I
I ask you
understand.
to
I
explain?
understand.
Did
Look,
I
I
ask
just
you to
you
explain
see
it?
how
No,
you
no.
cut me
I
off right
didn't
now?
ask. No. See, I didn't ask you to explain why you're doing it. I asked you to answer my question. And when I said that I expected you to whine about being interrupted, that's basically what you're doing right now. You're offering me an I don't care what the reason is. I don't care why you're interrupting me. I don't care why you're trying to talk to me. I don't even care why you're avoiding answering the question, because I bet I know why you're avoiding answering the question. And now you've deflected so much that even I have forgotten the specifics of the question I was asking you. So when I take you off mute and I say, answer the question, you're going to say, can you repeat the question? Because you don't remember it and I don't remember it. So good deflection. Do you remember the question, Mohammed?
I remember it, and salam alaikum, peace be upon. No, not salam alaikum, just bye-bye.
You remember it, and now you're running away. What a great witness you are for your pederast prophet, your child raping prophet, and your ridiculous religion to come in and be like, oh, let me talk to you about how architecture proves it. Oh, well, maybe architecture isn't the right word. Maybe the building proves it. What? These buildings that were hundreds, if not thousands of years old before the Quran was even written? Here's some questions for you, Muhammad. Do you think the authors of the Quran could know that previous civilizations existed and were conquered and died and destroyed, even if there was no God or prophet to let them know? Because everybody else in the world seemed to know about this. Even the people who constructed the pyramids, they knew that civilizations die off. They knew that empires get conquered and that peoples fade away. Everybody has always known that. If you find it remotely impressive that your particular interpretation of your book written by a child raping supposed prophet, or guided by that, if you find it in any way impressive that it knew about civilizations dying, boy, have I got news for you, because the book that you think it was coming to correct, the Torah, see, you think it's because it says it was coming to correct that? Those people knew about it too. As a matter of fact, there were specific biblical prophecies about the destruction of things like Tyre. And while that one didn't come true, and by their fruits you shall know them, and by their fruits, this is all bullshit. The reality is there's nothing impressive in any of that. And why would knowledge by the authors of the Quran of any subject, even a subject that was previously unknown, if nobody in history prior to the Quran knew that there were civilizations that died out, and the Quran said there are civilizations that have died out, why would that make any of the Quran's other claims true? This is the thing, and we went through this with the last caller. People find what they're looking for. And religions thrive by being untestable, unfalsifiable in many of their claims, and emotionally appealing. And different religions appeal to a different type of person. That's why there's over 1,000 different denominations that identify as some version of Christian, some of which are generally loving and throw out most of the Bible and just go with turn the other cheek, be nice to people, whatever. There's the gay-friendly churches, which are absolutely in conflict with a number of biblical passages, but they're much better people, and I'd rather hang out with them. Party at the gay church, and then we'll go to the drag bar. And then there's the Quran. Your particular book not only appeals to those who are indoctrinated and forced to be a part of that religion, but in many cases appeals to disenfranchised young men who do not find the loving aspect of Christianity or the horrific warmongering aspects of Christianity particularly appealing, but they want excuses to subjugate women even more than the Bible would allow, or they have some other reason. And so what do? Oh, it also appeals to the irrational individuals, the same as Christianity and other religions. Those individuals who cannot spot a fallacy, who do not understand how to demonstrate truth, or don't prioritize truth. This is why we're in the situation we're in. And all we're doing is sitting here saying, hey, how do you know that's true? And the things that you're trying to do to show that it's true are absolutely, demonstrably incapable of showing the truth of that. Just like Micah's stuff, while Micah lasted longer, his method was totally insufficient to reach the conclusion he did. And so is yours, which is why you started off talking about architecture and the buildings that existed. Hey, the existence of my grandpa's moonshine smuggling jalopy does not prove that anything I've ever said is right. Even if I can tell you what I know about smuggling moonshine because of him. That's not the way. See, predictions predict future events. If the Quran comes along and describes past events and you think that's impressive, whew, you should go study some history. That's what it's all about.
Hey y'all, before we move on to the next caller. So we're gonna try to get the show as close to 9 as possible since we're not reading any supers.
Yep.
But I wanted to try to do, I think you guys can take the next atheist call, and what I think is after that call, before we take the last one, I want to do a big drive to get a big push for donations, and we can just try to do something chaotic, like we can all just blurt out every name you see to try to give people a little bit of a sense of like something close to reading super chats. But yeah,
Okay.
shout out to you guys. We've already gotten over $1,000 for the first day of actively raising funds, so that's awesome.
Let's do this. Let's do this and we'll have fun with it. For the next 5 minutes from when I go, Justin and I will demonstrate the delay between us and the studio. Can you see super chats when they pop up in YouTube chat?
So I've actually got a separate chat window with the supers. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't have a separate one with the supers, but everybody start donating right now. It all goes to the Secular Student Alliance. And what we will do is we will both try to read out as many names as we see, just whatever name you've got in chat, of who's actually donating right now, starting now until 8:20. That's 5.5 minutes. And we can't have dead air, so I'm going to vamp in between. Anonymous donated $5. Try and read them all. If we read the same one, it'll sound like there's more, and it'll show them the delay.
It's even better. Chat loves the chaos.
Reverend Nate
sending 20 Canuck bucks.
That's right. Canuck bucks, I'm stealing it. Joshua Everett donated $20. Red Shrek donated $20. Anonymous donated $5 to the SA. Anonymous donated another $20 to the SSA. Get in there.
McDubbin 5. Anonymous 5 again. Anonymous another 5. This is the only time I ever get to talk over Matt. Veeks another 5 from Canuck bucks, and Dan a 20. Thank you so much.
Del
Dan.
donated $20.
And
Thank
Del
you so
donated
much.
20. Arcane Goat 5. Nicole 5 more. Dr. Person Man 5 more.
$5.
Bumble Beezy 5.
Mr. Boricua 10 donated $20.
$20. E Snipes another 5, and Anonymous coming in for another 5. Sophic Hazard donated 5. Transfix. Oh, that. Sorry.
You got when they donate $5, you got to get the name right. Noir Mood, Dark Mood. Ooh, nice. Hey, Krennic donated $5. Eric Lehman $20. Anonymous
Eric
$20.
Lehman,
Anonymous $5.
Anonymous 5. Drezek $5. Luis Morales $5. Anonymous another 20. Quantum Chaos donated 20 Canuck bucks, and Vescara 20. Rob Irwin 20. Anonymous another 20 Canadian
20 of alleged money.
Julian 5. The Atheist Mechanic 5 more. Red Shrek
$5. Red Shrek $50.
Big one from Red Shrek. Big one.
Devin LeBear.
We got excited.
With eyes wide shut, Dr. Griffith donated. Cap YT donated. There's another Dr. Griffith. With eyes wide shut. Yes, I did that. Crap, they're going too fast. Anonymous donated $5. Zzz donated $5. Lou B donated $10. Empress Lizard donated $5.
Empress Lizard 5. Arcane donated another 5. And Dr. Fudge, good to see you, another 5. Anonymous 5 as well. Ian Winchester 5. Anonymous 20. Anonymous 5 again. Our friend Chip 100. Giant dollars for the donation. Oh no, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
My conscience $1. Anonymous 20.
That's right. We're reading them out even if they're $1 because the Secular Student Alliance needs every dollar we can get them or every partial dollar. But this is a fundraiser. This is a charity event. I don't think YouTube takes any cut of this. And if I'm correct, then 100% of what you're donating goes to a good cause. The line doesn't take a cut. YouTube's not going to take a cut. And that's why.
Holy, not a demon.
Did you get Chip's $100? I missed it.
I got Chip. Yeah, we shouted out Chip.
That's
Chip got 100 in there. My Conscious got 1. Anonymous 20. Totally not a demon. We believe you. Another 20. Anonymous again for 20. Nor Mood 5. Fred
Kroon,
50 Canadian dollars.
SJL for 10.
SJ 10.
Space Barbarian
Space
$20.
Barbarian
WK
20.
Misty Nipples another $50. Thank you, Misty.
Crossed the $2,000 mark. Keep it going, guys.
Jessica, the most unique. Don't tell him that. We haven't crossed the 2,000 mark. You guys are slacking. Jessica, the most unique Doo-Doo McButtface donated £5. He had the leftist donated
the leftist $5. Red check $100. Where's my
less than 2 minutes? Less than 2 minutes of this chaotic reading. Del donated $5.
$100 gets a cowbell.
444. Oh, you got cowbell.
Where did we leave off?
It just scrolled automatically. I mean, I need to read it. Oh my gosh. There's a poll. So crap. There we go. Let me get caught up. Del donated $5. Noxy Proxy Rude Poo donated $5. Del donated another $5. And Anonymous donated $20. Shomp 10 donated $2. Anonymous $5. Anonymous $5. This anonymous person is amazing. And Ari Tenko, $5. Godwin donated $5. Ashley Ray, $50. Oh my gosh. Thank you, Ashley. Jolene donated $2 to the SSA. Domestic donated $5 to the SSA. I almost said the wrong thing. Anonymous donated $5. Hypa, $5. Anonymous another $5.
Anonymous $5. Tim Devaney, $5. Anonymous $9. Veeks, a $5 Canadian. And then it scrolled on me again. Shoot.
Yeah, every now and then it does the auto scroll to get caught up, and it's really there. I got it. Evolved Monkey donated $5, and we're at 8:19. There's less than a minute left. Maroons donated $6. Anonymous donated $20.
Anonymous 20 again. Holding my arms so I don't. So .com. Wait a minute.
Holding my arms out.com.
$5. Okay.
Tim Devaney,
another $5.
Butt Chugs and Harmony donated $5. Yeah, that's a good.
Becky $5. Anonymous 5 more. A Krenish donated $5. Anonymous with another 20. Alley Tiger 20. Anonymous $1. Proud Bad Hombre $10.
Another anonymous $1. Just a Ranther $5. Anonymous another $1. Testicular Torsion $5. Anonymous donated $5. Another anonymous donated $100. That's amazing. Marley Wood donated $20. We are hitting our time $20. Right now. I'm gonna read these last couple, and then we're gonna move on to
$66.
Sweet. And Evolved Monkey donated $10. And the final one of this bash right now is Chambermaid donated $20. We may do this again before the end of the show. I want to make sure we get to these calls, but we have to stop by 9. And if anybody donates a straight up one single $500 donation, I will go to the other room, and I will get the brand new 2-year-old Denton Head Annery boa constrictor longicauda that we just got for a new breeding project that showed up this morning. Arden, let me know if we get a single $500 donation for that. All right, let's get back to the calls real quick because this person, Mo's been on hold for 2 hours, pronouncing him from Washington. Mo, I'm not even going to read what the screener put in. You waited 2 hours. Tell us what you want to talk about.
Sure. So I meet with a discussion group that happens to be at a church where I live, and the facilitator of this group was reached out to by some of the clergy at the church. They're doing kind of a like town hall meeting thing where they are posing the question that myself and a couple other panelists have the opportunity to answer, which is, and let me get you the specific wording here. The question is, what do young adults need, and how might we, as in the church, offer to support being that need? Matt, I also emailed you about this, so if you feel like it would be a more appropriate venue to like discuss this over email and you want to get to some other callers, I totally understand that, but I just was curious and I wanted to pick your brain about that.
Well, I didn't already reply to your email?
Oh, maybe.
I might not have, because I have a new thing where if I don't know you and I have an email before, I'm probably not going to reply to any emails, but I'd love to get Justin's thoughts on this.
Yeah, I may not fully understand the question. Can you refresh the question for me?
Yes. So I have an opportunity to speak at an event that a church locally is hosting, in which I will be, among other panelists, answering the question, what do young adults need and how might we offer to support being that need? As a atheist and kind of an anti-organized religion individual, I think the three of us would probably agree on a lot of things. My kind of initial instinct is to say, apologize for the many atrocities of the Christian church and like close your doors and sell the property and give all the money to charity or some shit like that.
So if I understand what you're saying is,
sorry, go ahead.
They're asking you as an atheist what the church can do. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. So if I was in that situation, I would say a couple things personally. How can the church help young people from an atheist perspective? And I would say, stop indoctrinating our children. Stop telling them that they're going to go to hell if they don't believe your mythology. Stop using your church building to support a political agenda, which is a violation of your 501c3 contract with the government. Stop using your church as a method for pretending that you want to teach and help our kids by saying we have a daycare, we're cheap, we do after school programs. In fact, when I was in ministry, I actually worked at an after school program as part of our ministry. Stop doing these things, pretending like you're there to help when what you really want to do is just indoctrinate kids. Stop sending people to dumb mission trips overseas if the only goal there is to teach people about your religion. If you want to help people, you can do that without the church. So stop pretending like you care about people and actually care about people.
I would also add that because you're likely to find some of them that are like, oh, I already agree with all those things. Cool. Then instead of coming to atheists to ask us how the church can better help or serve atheists or whatever in the community, start talking to your fellow Christians who don't agree with you and won't do that. Clean up your own house first.
Totally. Yeah, I
mean, it's
agree.
a good start that they're
Thanks,
asking
dude.
you at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Could
Sure
you
thing,
say
man.
that again?
I said it's a good thing that they're at least asking you. When you first posited the question, I thought they were asking you as an atheist what you can do for the young people, which is a whole different question.
Yeah. this particular church seems to be kind of, new agey and at least has the appearance of trying to be accepting and open. And I'm in a pretty liberal, like lefty town, so I think that kind of matches the vibe check. But I am curious to see. I kind of wonder, like, if the invitation from ideologically different people or atheistic people is something that they actually are open to, or if it's kind of maybe just a performative thing for the church to say, oh, look how like open-minded and accepting we are. I'm curious to see what the actual reception will be to sort of a direct kind of attack on a lot of what the church stands for.
I really would feel better. I mean, we're all in agreement, and I like what Justin said, but it's so. For example, as I pointed out earlier, there are gay-friendly churches, Christian churches, rainbow flags up all over the place, and the people there are wonderful and loving, and I find them to be great allies on some issues, but they're absolutely useless allies and ridiculous on another front, which is there's not a gay-friendly church that's going to convince a fundamentalist biblical literist community that they're real Christians. They're the reason that Westboro Baptist Church goes after them, because no matter how disgusting Westboro Baptist Church is, they are on stronger biblical footing than the gay-friendly churches. And yes, I know that you can make a case for either one, and that's part of the problem with books like the Bible, is that you can almost make them say almost anything you want, provided you have a copious dose of ignorance and rationalization. Once you actually dig in on what was most likely intended by the authors and what the tradition is, and if God's actually okay with homosexuality, why does the Bible get it so horribly, obviously wrong repeatedly, and then God never comes along to correct it? He clearly doesn't like queer folks enough to offer them any sort of protection. And so how can God's definitely not an ally, even if he's okay with queer stuff. And if you're queer and you believe in a Christian God that does absolutely nothing to protect or guarantee that his understanding of queerness is, that your understanding of his understanding is correct, and that God doesn't do anything to back you up, I find that to just to be cartoonishly self-serving rationalization. But at the end of the day, I will happily stand next to all of those people in support of LGBTQ rights. And by the way, the same thing is true with regard to church-state separation, or as my friend Amanda prefers, and I agree, it should be separation of religion and government. And so organizations like Americans United for Church-State Separation, formerly the president of that organization was the Reverend Barry Lynn. He and I disagreed on whether or not there's a God, but we absolutely agreed on whether or not God or God thoughts have any place in politics, and that there should, in fact, be a separation of religion and government. I would like to see those Christian churches that are interested in coming to you to ask what they can do to help the atheist community or be better with the atheist community. I'd like to see them standing up alongside us and agreeing on church-state separation, on not, even if the Bible is opposed to homosexuality, about opposing that opposition. And it'd be nice. The problem is that how do you do that without saying, oh, I just have my own personal interpretation of the Bible? The very thing that the Bible warns against, and the very thing that the Roman Catholic Church basically persecuted Protestants for doing. I don't need the church to interpret it for me. I can have a relationship with the risen God. And then what you end up with is a whole bunch of different relationships with different views of the different proposed risen gods. So I'd like them to actually do stuff beyond just asking.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I think it was definitely someone on the line, but it might have been one of you two who said, if you feel the need to distance yourself from like the fundamentalist interpretation of your religion, then there's probably a fundamental issue with your religion.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you there. I'm curious, Matt, you said you wanted to make a difference between, or like note a difference between church and state separation and religion and government separation. I'm not really sure what that distinction is. Could you explain that?
Actually, I'm gonna punt on that for just a second. And see if you've got another question, ask that, because I'm going to give you a book reference.
Okay. I mean, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is, I have basically 5 minutes to be as impactful as I can. And my question would just be to professional communicators. I'm pretty confident with public speaking, and I don't have any issue in that regard, but just in terms of being as effective and concise as possible with this particular message, what would you recommend? Or are there any resources you would point to?
Oh, I'm sorry. Were you? I didn't hear the question. I'm looking up something real quick.
So, I can answer for me personally. I don't know of any good resources that would be helpful for this particular occasion. Unfortunately, I came to atheism kind of on my own. It wasn't through reading a bunch of other people's material. So unfortunately, my atheist backlog of stuff to read is pretty darn small.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to see chat?
I can right now.
I'm kind of just on the phone.
Okay. Then I posted a link in chat.
I can.
It's all right. It's all right. It's all right. I posted a link. It's all right. Wow. I guess you can't hear me. So I posted a link in chat, but if you can't get to it, what you want to look up is a book called The Citizen Lobbyist by Amanda Knief. That's Knief. It's a manual for making your voice heard in government, and I believe that this is the book in which she makes a case, at least in part, for her preference for describing it as separation of religion and government rather than church and state. And if I recall correctly, although I'm sorry, Amanda, if I get this wrong, a lot of it has to do with confusion, in the same way that people are confused about what free speech is and what it means. And when you talk about free speech, literally I had somebody write in to say that we're fascists because they got blocked from chat. And I'm like, I'm not a government and you have no First Amendment rights in chat. We have the rights, we retain the rights to get rid of anybody that we find troublesome. So it doesn't make us fascist.
You're obviously a fascist because you made them feel bad. That's the important factor.
Well, if that's all it took, then I'm definitely a fascist, and I would be. But unfortunately, fascism is a form of government, and it's authoritarian and racist and jingoistic. And anyway, but I don't think a lot of people understand what's truly meant by the separation of church and state, especially in a country like the United States, where they will view individual states separate from the United States. And so a better description than church state that much more clearly gets to the point is a separation of religion and government. That religious views cannot be used to inform government policy, and government policy cannot be used to inform religious doctrine. And the only, as Madison described it, the only valid use of the government in a conflict between religions or between religion and irreligion is to stay out of it until such time as one group's rights come in conflict with another group's rights. And outside of that, it's religious liberty. The atheists are the ones that are actively promoting religious liberty. I would rather nobody belong to any religion that wasn't true. I would rather see a religion demonstrate its truth than merely keep asserting it and what I think is essentially conning people. But I recognize that individuals have the right to believe as their conscience dictates. That belief isn't I don't accept doxastic volunteerism. I don't think you choose your beliefs. You're either convinced or you're not. And so I support your freedom to be a Christian, to be a Muslim, to be a racist, to be a bigot, to do all of these things, to have all of these beliefs. What I don't support is the actions that people take on behalf of them, or how they use those beliefs to impose upon the rights of others, whether they share those beliefs or not. I might agree with, somebody that there is a God and that Jesus is God and that Jesus doesn't like gay marriage. However, even if I did still believe all that, I would still side with the people who are in favor of gay marriage from a secular governmental standpoint, because that is the sort of freedom that God should be allowing, and that it's none of my business who somebody marries. And I don't think it's the Christian's business to impose on the government. As a matter of fact, my view, and Justin will probably point to the verse, is that as a fundamentalist, all of our leaders, no matter which ones we might think are the Antichrist, are part of God's plan, and to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar. So when somebody says, "Oh, Obama's the Antichrist," well, whether he is or not, he's the one that God put there in power, because as a fundamentalist, God is in charge. There's nothing that happens that doesn't go according to God's plan. Anyway, that I went off on 2 sidetracks.
Right on. Well, I super duper appreciate y'all and everything you do with the line and this channel. I think it's doing a lot of good for the world. Everybody in chat should donate to the fundraiser thingy that y'all got going on.
Thank you, Mo. Thank you, Mo. Appreciate it. We're going to let you go, Mo, but thank you so much. And don't forget to tune in. Arden, before we take this last call, is there any kind of rundown to go through again on the, I know we don't have the full schedule up, but the details on the SSA fundraiser this Saturday from 1 to 10 Central?
I think the important things to know is we're going to be potentially doing a game show night on Javon Bradley's channel tomorrow. All that's going to go to the fundraiser. I know Javon is sick also, so that it may fall through, but then Friday we have the golden mic, and then the full thing on Friday. So there's going to be lots of opportunities. If you don't get paid till Friday, that's cool. We'll be here waiting for you to dump all your paycheck into our pockets. Just kidding. The best thing about this fundraiser thing, too, guys, is I know normally YouTube takes a pretty substantial chunk of what you send to us through Super Chats. It's like about 30%, I think. But with the fundraising system that they have, 100% of it goes directly to the organization you're fundraising for. And it's not even like we get the money and then we give it to them and we have to prove it to you guys. They send the money directly to the organization. So it's totally above board. You can really trust that this is like your money is going to what we're saying it's going to. So we do appreciate all your participation in this.
And speaking of free speech, the government of the United States revoked at least 6 visas from visitors because they said unpleasant things about Charlie Kirk. So not only is free speech dying for us, but it's definitely dying for non-citizens first, because, by the way, they have free speech rights here as well, because the Constitution doesn't merely apply to citizens. It has specific, things rights that are granted to citizens, and some that are just granted to anybody who's here. But the very notion that 6 people could have their visas revoked because they dared to call a racist, or a fascist, or even if they're wrong, like, they're free to call me a racist and a fascist. You're free to call me gay. You can call me trans. You can call me a homophobe. You can call me slurs. You can call me Ray, and you can call me Jay. You can call me whatever the hell you want. And at no point will I in any way ask for or support you being deported or have your visa done. You know why? Because I'm not a fragile little bitch like the people running this country. I am somewhat fragile, but not that fragile. All right, here we go. Probably the final call from today, although if a theist calls in and gets in really quickly, we might take one more. But Sam's calling from Georgia, pronouns are him. Sam doesn't think that Christians really exist. Well, Sam, you're going to have to define some terms here, so I know what you mean.
So that's fine. Thanks for taking me on here, guys. This is actually, I'm calling because I actually super chatted this pretty much to Justin earlier, but then his stream crashed, so.
Sorry, YouTube crashed for a lot of people, actually. I thought it was my problem. It turned out it was a YouTube problem.
Ah, okay. Well, I actually kind of just have this written down. If we want to just try to define terms, I can do that. But I have this kind of written down to be a little bit more coherent.
Okay.
All right. So the reason I don't think Christians really exist is because they don't actually have an understanding of who Jesus is according to the biblical account. For instance, Christians are under the impression that they don't need to follow the Mosaic law. Fact is, Jesus said explicitly to do otherwise. That's one example that I have. That's pretty much what I have.
Okay. Do you think I used to be a Christian?
That depends if you actually believe what the book says about Jesus.
I thought I did. But also, do you understand that there's a bunch of different denominations of Christianity because there isn't agreement about what the doctrine or what the correct doctrine should be?
Yeah, I get it.
Okay. So how is your claim not just a no true Christian fallacy that any Christian could use to denounce any other Christian?
Because if you talk to a Christian and then you show them what the Bible actually says, they'll not believe what that says and make up another reason why that's not true. Like, I listen to Justin's show fairly often.
Will they? All of them? All of them will? And okay. Well, here, let me put my Jesus hat back on. Okay, I'm back to 40 years ago. I'm now Matt from 40 years ago. What would you like me to say that I believe about Jesus?
Do you believe that you should follow the Mosaic law?
What does Jesus say about the Mosaic law? That not a jot or tittle of it will be absolved until this entire world passes away, right?
That's what it says.
Cool. Then I believe that not a jot or tittle of it. However, Jesus also says that he came to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and that there's two separate, well, Jesus doesn't necessarily say this, but the notion that there are two separate covenants, one for Jewish people who are God's chosen people, and one who are Gentiles, and that one of them would be under the Mosaic covenant, one of them would be under the Noahic covenant, is how I was taught to understand it. If I'm wrong, how do you show that I'm wrong?
We just go to what the Bible says.
I'm sorry. I've read the Bible, and so has my pastor, and so have all the people in my church and the denomination, and have for ages. And that's why there's a bunch of different churches that don't agree. I asked how you could show me I'm wrong.
No, I mean, if you don't accept, well, you're saying that they do read the Bible. I guess I would just have to go to make sure that that's actually what the translation says in the original language, the best we can tell. I know Justin can give us a bit more of insight on that.
I mean, Justin just made a face that makes it look like he's calling nonsense too. But what do you mean? What the original says, as best we can tell? How can you tell?
No, I mean the original language. That's what I mean. Not the actual book. We don't have any originals. That's not what I meant.
Well, what difference does it make what it meant in the original language? What difference does it make what it meant in the original language, or what the author meant if it was inspired by God and God promised to hold his word, and that all scripture is useful for instruction? And so if we've been instructing ourselves like this, are you suggesting that every Christian church forever has managed to get it wrong?
I'm positing that they don't have the whole picture, which means they don't actually believe what the book says.
No. Not having the whole picture is not the same as not believing what the book says. There are plenty of us, like, for example, when I was a Christian, I still am. I got my hat on and everything. I believe that the Holy Spirit reveals to me the correct understanding in the way that I am capable of understanding it at the time. So when I read the Bible, I'm reading it with, I think, the guidance of the Holy Spirit. That leads me to what I believe is the correct understanding according to God. And the Bible says, let God be true and every man a liar. So why shouldn't I trust the Holy Spirit that I feel instead of you?
I mean, I'm not trying to convince them. So, I mean, I guess maybe they shouldn't listen to what I have to say.
Cool. Then I'll keep listening to the Holy Spirit, and it doesn't matter what some atheist thinks.
Good. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's for them, yes, but I'm not trying to talk to them about it. I'm talking to us as a non-believing community.
You seem to have completely missed the point. The point is, how do you say, or how does anyone say, this is in fact what the book says and means when there are countless denominations that don't agree?
I guess I could also just go, I suppose, to what the Bible says about how God not being an author or the author of confusion. And it seems to be that all the denominations that exist are rather confused.
I've used that same argument as well, but it doesn't support your claim that none of them are right.
No? Okay. Well, it sounds like they don't actually believe that God is not the author of confusion because they think everyone else is confused and everything happens according to him.
No.
He is
We don't have to do they. I'm literally sitting here right in front of you, Sam. I can tell you what I believed. I believed that God was not the author of confusion and that the Bible is not confusing when read with the guidance of the Holy Spirit, and that it is men who are injecting via their fallen, sinful natures, and God has given them over to a reprobate mind, that are making the confusion, not God.
But everything happens according to God's law, right? And the will.
Yes. And the thing is, God knows everything that's going to happen, but men are sinful and fallen and have corrupted the world and have a corrupted understanding. God gave them over to reprobate mind, and they have either been granted by God's grace salvation and an understanding, or they have been abandoned by God and given over to these reprobate minds for reasons that God understands, but I don't need to understand.
I mean, maybe I'm just missing it, but I'm not seeing how that's a counter to what I said.
It's a counter to what you said because I'm telling you what my understanding of Christianity is, and you're saying I'm wrong. And the question is, how do we prove that you're correct, that I'm wrong?
Well, I guess I would need to ask you what you believe Jesus says about things, or what you think the character is.
I just told you.
Yes, about the understanding part. But if I asked you the characteristics of Jesus Christ himself, what would you say?
What difference does it make?
That's up to you.
You're saying I'm not a true Christian. What is your criteria for what a true Christian is, and how do you know that your criteria is correct?
My criteria for a true Christian is somebody who believes the entire biblical account of who Jesus Christ is.
That is not my that is not my definition of true Christian. It's not the definition of true Christian from any organization that I'm remotely conversant with. So you, as a non-believer, not conversant with Christian doctrine, Christian tradition, have invented out of whole cloth a ridiculous standard by which to judge Christians. I mean, your standard's even harsher than God's, and actually God would reject it because the Bible even acknowledges that not everything in the Bible is necessarily accurate. All scripture is God approved, God breathed, and useful for instruction, but there are also passages, and I'm not going to remember them at the time, and I'm taking this hat off and I'm done pretending to be Christian again in order to point out that you're just using what is an obvious no true Scotsman fallacy, where you, as a non-believer, are determining and defining what the criteria is for true Christian. You don't get to do that. Only God gets to decide who is and isn't a true Christian.
Okay, I mean, If you don't think that all Christians should believe Jesus, I suppose.
That's not what I said.
What the Bible says, because if you make up,
that's not what I said. Now you sound like a theist because you're arguing dishonestly. After I backed you into a corner and showed your fallacy, now you're changing things because I didn't say what you said it, what you rephrased it as. And Justin, go ahead because I have nothing more to add to Sam.
So, Sam, I think the problem that you've got here is that, one, there were Christians before the Bible. So certainly having an agreement with all of the Bible is not a necessary requirement for being a Christian. Secondly, if you actually read the rest of the Bible, unfortunately, Paul and the disciples have a claim that the law is no longer required. You're probably familiar with Acts chapter 10, when the sheet comes down in Peter's vision, and God tells Peter to eat the animals that are unclean to eat. And Peter says, God forbid, I've never eaten anything unclean. And God says, don't declare unclean what I've declared clean. And then the message goes to the Gentiles, right? And then after that, in Acts chapter 15, they have a meeting between the disciples and Paul. And they decide in this meeting to only impose 4 stipulations on the Gentiles converting to the religion, and rather than having to obey all the law. And then when you get further into the pastoral, not the pastoral epistles, but some of the latter epistles, we find that Paul has a different idea altogether about the law. In 1 Corinthians 9:20, he says that even he's no longer under the law, he being a Hebrew. Ephesians 2:14 and 15 says that he did abolish the law and all of its commandments and requirements so that the Jews and the Gentiles can become one people group, right? So if you're saying that you have to believe all of the Bible to be a Christian, well, once Jesus dies, they change the doctrine. I agree with you. Jesus was a Jew. He believed that righteousness came from following the law. That's what he believed. I agree that this contradicts the writings in Acts and the writings in the rest of Pauline's stuff. The problem is, if you're a Christian, you're going to say, well, that's progressive revelation from the Holy Spirit. God did that. And even as early as Origen writes in his dialogues against Celsus, he addresses this contradiction and says, well, the people Jesus was talking to weren't prepared yet. It wasn't until after his death that people were prepared for this revelation from the Holy Spirit. So if you're a Christian and someone's telling you that you're not a real Christian because you don't follow the law, the reality is, if that were the case, you'd have to throw out a good portion of the New Testament, and I don't think Christians are willing to throw out the New Testament.
I had to mute Sam. I'm going to unmute you. I realize you're going to hear a beep. Basically, it sounds like you're at work at a bar, and the background noise was overwhelming. So I'm going to unmute you now. My apologies, but it was background noise.
Oh, I didn't realize it was bad. Sorry.
That makes sense, Sam?
There was that. One more time,
Better.
I was taken off.
Did you hear what I said?
I don't know if the background's better now.
Yes, better. Thank you.
That makes sense what I said?
Okay.
Sam?
Whether it made sense or not, we have to let Sam go. We've got to wrap up in a few minutes. And so, since we're not reading Super Chats, and all of the Super Chats are going to the Secular Student Alliance, the show is over in 6 minutes. Arden, did we get that massive donation that lets me show off the new snake?
We did not, but also we don't have to end right at 9. We can go a little over. So if we wanted to do another round of bids for donations, we could do that if you guys got the energy.
I think we can do it and end at 9 because we did a good 6-minute run beforehand. It's 5 minutes till right now. Let's do it. We are going to take your Super Chats until exactly 9 o'clock. Reading them all out. I'll do silly voices or whatever the hell you guys want. This is all going to the Secular Student Alliance. There is no overhead here, no YouTube overhead. Everything is for this fundraiser we are doing this weekend, and we're going to read these off. In case Arden has to start rolling the credits at some point, huge thank you to Justin for joining me this week, and I don't know, everybody else for tuning in as well. But let's get those donations rolling.
I had a blast.
This is a fun time. Anonymous donated $20 to the Secular Student Alliance. By the way, the Secular Student Alliance exist specifically for the same reason that there are pride organizations. I had a secular atheist professor call me, and if you guys get $100 in the next couple minutes, I'll tell you what this person said to me without exposing who they are. But the Secular Student Alliance exists because people should not be ashamed or marginalized or treated poorly because they don't believe what the majority believes or what the common beliefs are or what a religion believes. Ed Smee donated $5. The Atheist Mechanic donated $50. Ashley donated another $5. A Crinic donated $2.
Greenwich.
Untitled gave us $20 in alleged money. Anonymous another $5. Bitwise
Another 5.
donated
Bitwise
$10.
10. Anonymous another 20.
Is that 100 yet?
I don't know who
That is
Anonymous
100.
is, but they're on fire.
Yeah, that is 100. Okay, cool. There's an atheist professor who I will not name today, but I might at some point in the future, who called me in a panic. Red Trek donated $100. Called me in a panic saying, oh, I'm having a terrible crisis. What if by continuing to debunk these theistic arguments, Snipnut donated $10 and Space Barbarian donated $20. What if by continuing to rebut these bad arguments from them, the theists go off and just come up with better arguments and better evidence? Aren't we just basically creating superbugs by inoculating? And I was like, wow, thanks for showing that you, despite being an atheist, don't understand skepticism. When you say that, that's what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to go off and come up with better arguments supported by better evidence. And when the arguments are sufficient for you to accept them, then that's what you're supposed to do. The only reason you could be upset that they're coming up with better arguments is if you are closed-minded and have already concluded that they are wrong and that they can never produce anything. How did you determine that an unfalsifiable claim has been falsified? How did you determine that there's no argument or evidence for this just because you haven't been presented it before? And this is a prominent individual who is lauded, or used to be somewhat lauded in the community. And no, it's not Dawkins. Untitled, $5 Canadian, and Tom donated $1 because every dollar helps.
Unstillborn with $20 and Angelfish $10 on top of that.
We've got
Guys, we have 2 minutes left.
Yep. You got angel fishes?
2 minutes.
Yep.
Let's see. We're just shy of 3,000. I bet you guys could really impress us and get up to like
How shy are we?
under $50.
Under $50.
Oh, hell yeah, we can do that.
If you guys don't get
let's
to
go.
$50 in before this show's over in the next 2 minutes, I'll quit. I mean,
This is
I was
terrible.
going to
We
set
gotta
a
do
crazier goal
$50.
because I've seen our audience show up when we give them a time limit. Suddenly, all of a sudden, like people found $400 lying around their back pocket. So,
Check
if
your
somebody's got that,
subscriptions.
if somebody's got that $500, I'll still grab that snake out of nine. If you get us to 3,500 in the next minute, I'll name that professor.
Oh, hell yeah.
I shouldn't-
Anonymous,
I shouldn't do
$5.
that.
Joshua Everett, 13. Melatonin Ale donated 5. Gretchen,
Melatonin
friend, great to
Ale.
see you. Thank you for the 6. United again for another 50 Canuck bucks. And Anonymous
There
for
we
5.
go.
Snipnut for 5. Just a Ranter for 5. Anonymous again for 50. Red
Oh my
Trek.
God.
Another
Oh my God.
50 Red Trek. Anonymous 100. Thor versus
Oh my God.
Darwin,
see what I tell you.
Adjunction, $100. Anonymous,
shouldn't have done that.
50.
Are we at
Space
35 yet?
Barbarian, 20.
not quite.
You open Pandora's box now.
I know.
122.
We're going to
away.
get there.
$122
Anonymous 5,
in
let's
how
go.
many seconds?
We need 122.
Oh, we
got
can
it. Come on.
squeeze a little
Oh,
bit out
we
of
We're
did
this.
almost there.
Oh,
We're almost there.
What's the total
Empress
right now?
Lizard, $5.
3,388.
There's latency.
Okay, we didn't get there. I don't have to out that person, which means I can out them another time for panicking and not understanding skepticism. Besides
I'm
being,
pretty sure you've told that story with the name before.
did I?
I
Well,
think so.
then if somebody in chat knows the name, you're free to say it, and I would say if you got it right. But let's wrap this stuff up. First of all, huge thank you to everybody for donating to the Secular Student Alliance. Coming in close to $3,500 is amazing. And but mostly I have to thank Arden, because I would just sit here and keep arguing and not put out calls for that stuff because I'm really bad at it. I'm bad at asking money or help for myself, and I am bad at asking money for other organizations. But once prompted, I will do damn near anything that I can do to get you guys to contribute to incredibly good causes like Secular Student Alliance, like Recovering from Religion, like Black Nonbelievers, like Americans United, any number of things. These are people who are trying to make the world better. If you or somebody you know is struggling and needs help, remember that the Secular Therapy Project, which you can find at seculartherapy.org, is a way to find therapists in your area that you can meet with in person or online. That's all independent. They don't hook you up with somebody. They don't do anything related to insurance or anything else. It is a connection so that you can make sure that you are getting science-based counseling. And if you're a student at a university and there's not a Secular Student Alliance in your area, reach out to the SSA to find out what you can do to get help starting one. And if you're not the one that's comfortable doing that, if you're the secularist out there at the university that is absolutely terrified of going too far, of saying, hey, it was Peter Boghossian, of saying, hey, I've gone too far. I don't want to out myself. It's too risky. I don't want to out myself as queer. I don't want to out myself as secular. I don't want to out myself in any way, but I desperately think we need this and I'd like to participate. There are ways that you can work out anonymous meetups and quiet meetups to find the community of people that you can build and then get help from an organization like the Secular Student Alliance to engage and build a community on your campus. And we need more of them because I guarantee you the religious takeover of the government is going to continue to universities and schools. This is not going to get smoother or easier. It's going to get rougher and worse all the time. And if you're not the person to be the face of it or the one that organizes it, they can at least help you find the people who might. And the last little bit of advice I have for anybody who's starting a Secular Student Alliance thing is the same piece of advice I give to every SSA group I ever talk to. Make sure that your leadership are not graduate students who are leaving next year. Serve, and when you're beginning your last year, pass over leadership to the people behind you and stay to be a resource for that final year so that everything doesn't fall apart when the current group of leaders leave. I can't tell you how many times we've had to restart organizations at different campuses just because of attrition. And it's normal. You guys get busy. Once you're done with college, you're not going to stay there and run an SSA probably. You may not even live anywhere near that. So start planning in advance to find replacements and be available to reach out to them as a resource as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Don't forget about the fundraiser this weekend from 1 to 10 Central Time right here on the Line Network. Justin, where can they watch you? Apart from
I'll
here.
be live again on Deconstruction Zone and also on DZ Debates Friday. So tune in. I'm live every Friday night. And also I'm here when I'm on the schedule. So I always post on my channel. If you're not following the Line yet, you should be following by now. But I always post on my channel when I'm going to be here. So you don't have to miss Justin on the Line.
But you won't, because Justin will be back. Anyway,
Also, we hit 3.6K. We fucking destroyed it. You guys are crazy. So proud of you guys.
That's huge.
And that's just so good. And it's like 99% Arden. I mean, let's be honest. I would have sat here and jibber-jabbered and talked and listened to Justin and not put out the call. So thank you, everybody. Take care. Do good. See you next time.